the fence rests, let's lay it down. Gonna dig deep, wave that verdict round. The defense rests, time to analyze. With the evidence, we'll unveil the crime. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule at the defense rests.
Please be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all had a nice evening. I want to start by thanking you all. My people tell me everybody was here right on time. Greatly appreciate that. So thank you very much. And now we're ready to proceed. Attorney Barr, you ready to call the state's next witness?
I am. Angela Violet.
Very good.
And the witness stand in this courtroom is up to just to the left of the judge. If you could approach the witness stand, face the judge, and remain standing for your oath, please.
You raise your right hand. You swear to the testimony you're about to give the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and the reason no one is person.
I do.
You can be seated right there. Please be there and scoot up the microphone.
Sure. Okay.
Hi. I made my first mistake of the day and calling you as Angela Violet. Could you state and spell your name for the court record, please?
Angela LaChance, first name Angela, the last name is LaChance.
I want to ask you some questions about your relationships, and I understand that your last name is not Violet, it's LaChance, but who do you consider yourself with?
KYAL Violet,
How long have you guys been together?
22 years.
And do you have a family together?
We do, 2 children.
Can you give me just their ages?
My son is 15, my daughter is 18.
And I don't think we need to get in too much to your son. My understanding, he did not witness directly events here, but we met your daughter yesterday.
Yes,
What's her name?
Kendra Violet.
Okay. And where do you guys live?
43 Summer Street, Rochester.
Who do you live there with?
KYAL Violet and our 2 children.
We had heard yesterday.
So we were just kind of having a family night. We had made dinner. We had all retired up to our bedrooms. It was about, 10 o'clock or so. Myself and Kyle were in our room. Kendra was in her room. My son was in his room playing video games.
Tell us a little bit, I think we know, but what was going on outside?
It was snowing.
All right. And not just snowing, right? This was a pretty big
It was
storm.
a pretty big, yeah, the biggest storm of the year, I'm pretty sure.
What was your plan, and not to get too far in the weeds of this, but what was your plan for clearing the snow from your driveway?
My daughter's friend, her father plows, and he was supposed to come plow our driveway. We were going back and forth between text messages for quite some time, and he didn't show up when he said he was going to show up. And quite a few hours had gone by, so I really didn't think that he was going to show up. So our plan essentially was going to be to have to go out and shovel by hand.
All right. Plan B, shovels by hand.
Yep.
Create some degree of anxiety, concern among everybody?
Yeah, of course, it was a lot of snow.
And did you need to use cars in the morning?
Yes, yep.
Who lived next door to you, I guess as you are facing the house to your right?
Jason Levesque and his parents.
And You said that there was kind of a plan A for your plowing and a plan B by hand. Look, had there been any concerns about the volume of snow out front?
Well, yeah, the snow piles up from the plow going through the street, and then it got built up even more by Mr. Levesque.
And so had that been an issue prior to this night?
Yes.
In what way? How can you describe how you've seen the process work before?
He would plow his snow from the front of his driveway past our telephone pole, build up a pile in front of the street, and then push it in front of our driveway.
Okay, and you say there would be a pile near or just beyond the
telephone pole, yeah.
And was that a first step? And then what
Yeah.
followed? And then what was the second step?
He would also, because obviously he can't leave it in the street, he would ultimately push it up the end of our driveway.
And did that include the snow that was then backhauled out of his driveway?
Yes.
And had that been a tension point prior to before?
It had happened at least one time before.
Okay. You were just talking about a family night moving towards, sounds like closer to bedtime, where people disperse in your home, doing their own thing.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
When we realized that Kinder's friend's father was probably not going to show up and we were going to have to plow by hand, Kyle noticed that Mr. Levesque was plowing his snow to the end of our driveway, which essentially would have made it more difficult for us to plow by hand. So he went out to ask him not to do that.
Can I ask you to provide kind of a sequence of events where you went to?
Yeah, so after he grabbed his hoodie, he went to walk out. I went into Kinder's room. I said, your dad just went out to go talk to the neighbor. Me and Kinder walked downstairs into the living room. We were kind of just walking around the living room. And then we went to the bay window next to the screen porch where the video camera is. And we were looking outside.
So this may be obvious. We were out there yesterday,
Yeah.
and you're describing there were two bay windows facing your house from your driveway. Are you
Yeah.
talking about the one to the left or to the right?
If you're facing my screen porch,
Yep.
it's to the left.
If you're facing the screen
If you're
porch,
facing my house,
then it's the first one to the
yes,
left. Okay.
yeah.
And you said you were both looking outside from there, and there was a surveillance camera from a similar angle. Is that fair?
Yeah, so the surveillance camera comes from the top left-hand side of the window, and myself and Kendra were just, looking from the middle, Kendra was on the right.
After the events occurred outside,
Yeah.
did you have contact with law enforcement, any police officers?
Yes,
Did you agree to provide the surveillance footage from that camera to law enforcement?
yes, I gave it to them that night. I provided Kyle's phone because our cameras are on an app that was on his phone. We couldn't get onto the app on his phone, so I emailed it to them, I airdropped it to them. I provided multiple different ways of them having that video.
And that night, did they come inside at some point after this event and actually view
Yes.
your phone?
Yes,
Are you aware whether or not they actually then took a screen video of your screen video as well for
Yes.
short term?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I don't want to gratuitously do this, unnecessarily do this, but we watched that video yesterday.
Yeah.
And I want to play an abbreviated version. I don't think we need to go through the whole thing.
Sure.
Certainly defer to the defense, but I want to show you a portion of that because I have some follow-up questions for you.
okay.
Okay? Bear with me just a second, Your Honor. May we set up? We managed to upgrade. We'll get- And Your Honor, for the record, this is State's Exhibit 2 as a full exhibit.
Thank you.
Judge, this will just take a minute. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may the witness leave the stand and approach the well. His voice seems to carry fairly well, but I'm just going to bring this down and. Angela, do you recognize this image?
Yes, that's the image from the surveillance camera in my bay window.
Thank you. Council, can we play and spare? I don't know that everybody needs to see the plowing again, but perhaps when Mr. Violet leaves the residence. And can you identify this person?
That's Kyle.
You had described him putting on a hoodie. Did you see him do that?
Yes.
I could stop there. Are you able to see Mr. Levesque's truck door open in the left corner adjacent to the house?
Yes.
Okay. And you had just said, there he goes.
Yep.
Who are you referring to?
I'm referring to Jason getting off his truck.
All right. And can I have you continue? Can I pause it here? You just said, I hope you don't do anything stupid.
Yes.
What are you talking about?
Mr. Levesque.
And are you able to hear from your, I guess, vantage point, the conversation or words exchanged, if any, between Levesque and?
No, we were not able to hear anything.
Okay. Could we continue to play? We stop. Can you tell who it is that backs away or separates from the truck?
In which car?
This part here, the individual on the right to your knowledge is.
That's Kyle.
Okay.
That I can see right there by the pole.
All right. Please.
No, he gets up. He has gone out of jail. Hey! He just got him! He just got him! Hey!
Can you rewind just back to approximately the point where she indicates he has a gun? Good. Pause, please. You yelled at about this point that he has a gun.
That was Kendra.
Kendra,
Yeah.
were you able to see the fire?
So when Kendra noticed the gun, I was walking towards the window, but I was looking down when she yelled, "He has a gun." I looked up and I witnessed the first shot to the face.
Could you tell that he had a firearm in his hand?
Yes.
And was there anything about the lighting or the distance that prohibited you from seeing what he had in his hand?
Nothing at all. I had very clear view.
Were you able to see whether Kyle had anything in his hand or brandished anything in his hand during your period of observation?
No, Kyle never brandished anything or had anything in his hand.
And can you roll this?
No, he gets up. He has gone out of jail. Hey! He just got him! He just got him!
What direction was Kyle proceeding in when the first shot was fired?
Kyle was starting to walk home.
And the next 5 shots, were you able to tell what direction he was proceeding when they were fired?
Kyle was already on the ground from the first shot.
And his movements, in what direction did he go?
He was trying to army crawl home.
Can you just proceed? Who is this?
That's Kendra.
And who is this?
That's me.
I think that's good. Ma'am, could you resume the witness stand, please? Sorry, man. Can I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
We just left off where you went outside. Can you describe how Kyle appeared to you when you reached out?
When I went outside, he was curled up in a ball by the telephone pole, bleeding profusely. I called 911 immediately.
What's your estimate of how long it took for law enforcement to respond?
Only a couple of minutes, it was very fast.
And from there, can you just briefly describe to us the sequence of events? You experienced it.
Yeah, one of the officers started rendering aid, while the other officers took Mr. Levitt into custody.
And when you say rendering aid, did they render aid at the scene, at that location?
Yeah, I believe one of the officers ripped his shirt off. They had to turn him over onto his side because he was choking on the blood from the first shot to the face.
Were you there for that?
Yes.
And can you just confirm for us that Kyle was taken from the scene by ambulance to a local hospital?
Yeah, first he was taken by ambulance to Frisbie. I met him there.
And can you just describe for us the sequence of events and what happens next? In terms of
I couldn't get my car out of the driveway, so I had to call one of my coworkers who came and picked me up, and she brought me to Frisbie. They immediately let me back into the room where Kyle was. They had taken off most of his clothing. They had to cut it off. He was not conscious. He was still alive, but he was not conscious. They told me that he had lost a good portion of his blood and that they were.
I just have to object to your
But I understand the objection, Your Honor. I'll rephrase and focus. When I'm asking about the experience, it's not necessary, and other witnesses would have to provide the actual assessment. And so I'd ask you not to convey through hearsay what the doctors told you.
Oh, sure.
Just, I just want to get a sequence of your experience. Where did you go? How long were you at Frisbie?
He was not, I couldn't tell you exactly how long we were there. It was not very long. He was transported to Portsmouth shortly after.
What did you do from there?
I went to Portsmouth. I had my coworker drive me to Portsmouth.
And were you able to see Kyle at Portsmouth?
I was not able to see Kyle at Portsmouth because he was in emergency surgery.
And how long you did your estimate? And again, I don't need to hold you to an exact, but how long do you think you were at Portsmouth?
Maybe a couple of hours.
And what happened next?
They took him to Boston Medical Center.
You know how we got down there?
Yeah, by ambulance.
And what did you do?
I went home to check on my children because they had stayed home. And then I went to Boston.
And how often were you able to see Kyle in Boston?
I stayed with Kyle in Boston from the day he got there until the day he went home.
Approximately how long was he admitted to the Boston facility?
April 5th to May 1st.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to approach. This is going to be Court permission, I'd like to approach, show this witness, what's been marked as State's Exhibit 19 as a full exhibit. Counsel is 260 severed.
Just double check. I think we have no problem. And that's okay. Very good, thank you.
Yeah, let me show you a photograph from that time. It's you recognize that photograph?
That's Kyle.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of how he appeared?
Yes.
Is that right? Your Honor, can I ask the court to indulge me and remind the jurors that they'll have full access to any exhibits that are.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. So while you take time looking at it now, I'm saying you have an opportunity, any full exhibits will have an opportunity later in the jury. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Angela, you said he was, released from the hospital. What was his, for instance, his last medical appointment related to these events?
The last medical appointment he just had was in the beginning of March, and he just went for a CAT scan it was Tuesday, I think, Monday or Tuesday? Monday.
Remember where Kyle was working before these events?
Yeah, he was working at Eldridge Lumber in Portsmouth.
Doing what?
He would like, it's not a mill yard where they, make the wood, they sell it. So he would like stock the shelf, help people if they came in to buy the lumber, load their trucks, stuff like that.
Been able to return to work?
No,
Physically, how is he today?
I'm still recovering.
And can you describe kind of his mental state concerning these events now?
He certainly is not the same person mentally that he was before this happened. He has severe PTSD. He's very depressed. He has a lot of anxiety because a lot of paranoia.
Is he still at home with you?
Yes.
No, he's 7. Angela, this may sound like a strange question, but there's some legal obligations on my part. But I need to ask you, are you able to identify Jason Levesque in the courtroom today?
Yes, he's right over there.
And could you please identify him by some description of clothing or his appearance?
He's the man sitting right there with the dark beard, with the gray suit on and the blue undershirt.
Thank you. Your Honor, may the record reflect that this witness has identified the defendant as the individual depicted in the images that you referred to. Thank you, Your Honor. Angela, those were my questions. I appreciate your time. As you know, Attorney Sisti will likely have some questions for you as well.
Sure, thank you.
If I may get. Yeah.
Morning.
Good morning.
I do have a few questions,
Sure,
and nobody wants to put you through this kind of stuff. You understand that, right?
I do.
Okay, good. Prior to this date, did you ever have a conversation with Jason?
I had never spoken to that man ever.
Correct. You've never spoken to that man ever, and he has never approached you before that date. Ever.
No.
I think I may be having a technical difficulty.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's give it easy. We don't want to bad way to stop a trial. Sorry. Okay, let's get back to it. You never had a conversation with him, right?
No.
He never had a conversation with you, right? He never had a bad word for you, right?
No, I never spoken to him.
Okay. And how long were you there from the time you left Farmington?
At the time of the incident, it was 2 years we were living there.
And again, I don't know if I heard you right, but was there a particular reason you left Farmington?
No, we just got a new place. It happened to be in Rochester.
All right, even though the kids were comfortable in the school, you wanted to go to Rochester, is that the deal?
Yeah.
On that particular night, actually, I think you may have made a little bit of a mistake, but I don't want to get too technical. It actually wasn't snowing at the time, at about 10 o'clock p.m. on that night, correct? Snow had stopped.
I'm not really sure.
You're not sure? I want to make sure that we're sure of a lot of things here. Actually, let me ask you a kind of a goofy question, I guess.
Sure.
You were having problems and anxiety about the driveway being plowed?
Yes, my daughter's friend, father was supposed to come plow us out with his plow truck.
Okay. And you all had to get out in the morning and you were concerned about that?
Yes.
And you were actually kind of anxious about having to hand shovel the whole thing?
I wouldn't call it anxious. We were concerned that we were going to have to shovel by hand. Yes, it wasn't, no.
Well, you saw in the video there was a guy right next door with a plow, right?
Yes.
Did anybody have the idea that maybe you could go out and ask That guy right there?
Actually, my mother, who used to live in the front of our house, had asked Mr. Levesque one time prior when it snowed.
I'm gonna ask you, did you or Kyle have the idea that maybe you could go right next door because you were in some trouble and ask him to plow your driveway?
No, because he had refused it before,
To you?
to my mother.
So you don't know what happened there, do you?
I wasn't present, no, but she told me.
Okay, so let's talk about you and Kyle.
Sure.
Neither you nor Kyle had the idea to go and ask him politely to just plow your driveway, right?
No, we didn't ask him.
Okay. And that idea never came up, or it never came up in conversation?
No, we never talked about it.
Now, at some point in time, around, I guess it was a little after 10 o'clock PM,
Mhm.
Kyle decides to go out to talk to Jason, right?
Yes.
And was he a bit perturbed?
He was, I don't know, a bit perturbed, I guess, that he was plowing the snow at the end of our driveway, yes.
Well, actually, you say that, but we're gonna play that video again in a second, all right?
Yeah, sure.
We will. And the end of your driveway, of course, is on one side of the telephone pole, right?
Yes,
And on the other side of the telephone pole, there's no driveway there.
yeah, that's where his porch, Mr. Levesque's porch is.
Right. In fact, the driveway itself actually isn't at the edge of the telephone pole. It actually starts about 8 feet in,
Okay,
right? I mean, you live there.
yeah,
Okay. I mean, I'll show you a photo if you need to see it still.
Sure.
Okay. I don't want to be messing around. I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. 294 evidence. That's what
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could we have this? I'm going to show you what we marked as defendant D for identification.
yes.
Here's what it says.
That is the front of Jason Levesque's house, and my driveway is to the left if you're looking at the picture.
Okay, is that a pretty good picture?
Yes,
Accurately show that.
yes.
Okay, the ID straight.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, the ID straight. Close it. Before I show the jury, I want to make sure we have this set up properly. We've got the utility pole, right?
Yes,
And the utility pole is basically right in the center of this picture.
I wouldn't call that the center.
Pretty close. It's on the side of your ground.
His house is in the center of the picture.
Okay. The pole is on the side of your ground.
Right,
Looking at the photograph, the pole is to the right of your ground.
correct.
If I get close to the pole. I'm going to ask that the video be played a little bit in a minute, okay? But I want to be clear here. Levesque wasn't plowing your driveway that day, right?
He was not plowing my driveway now.
And the department Public Works had plowed the road that day, right?
Yes,
And your concern was that they had plowed in front of your driveway, right?
they had already plowed in front of my driveway, correct?
Okay. And that was a concern because you gotta bust through that by hand the next day if nobody comes to plow, right?
Right,
Okay. And that was the concern that you folks were talking about just prior to Kyle approaching Jason, right?
yeah, the concern was that he was piling more snow that we were gonna have to shovel.
Okay, I want to be clear because we're going to see the video again. Okay?
Sure.
All right. And we know which side of the pole, is what and where the driveway is, right?
Yep.
And the photo I showed you is accurate as to where the driveway is, right?
Yeah, and you can see that the side of my driveway by Mr. Levesque's house, the telephone pole is right by the end of that part. And we do park our cars there as well.
Again, that's fine. I'm not arguing with you at all, okay? But that pole's not part of your driveway.
No, the pole is at the corner of my driveway.
Right. In fact, there's a few feet before you get to your driveway from the pole.
I couldn't tell you exactly how far from my driveway.
Okay. All right. We're going to get to it in a second. So it actually wasn't snowing. You didn't ask Levesque to plow the snow. Your claim is that he was plowing snow into your driveway?
Yes, he was plowing some snow in front of my driveway.
And you are claiming that that's actually what you saw?
Yes,
Have you seen this entire video yet?
I have seen the entire video multiple times.
Okay, good. All right. Now, in that particular video as well, there is additional comments from you. Not only did you say, I hope he doesn't do anything stupid. And today you claim that you're referring to Jason.
Yes,
And you say, I hope he doesn't do anything fucking dumb.
yes,
And today you're claiming that that has to do with Jason.
it does.
Did you tell the police that at any point in time?
Yes, I did.
You did. And which police officer did you discuss
I'm
that?
not sure. I talked to so many.
Talked to so many. Well, let me tell you something, okay? Before you said those two things, you also said something, okay? As Kyle was crossing the driveway
Mhm.
toward Jason. Do you remember what you said?
Yep, there he goes.
There he goes.
Yeah.
What were you referring to there?
Mr. Levesque getting out of his truck.
He wasn't getting out of the truck.
The door had opened.
Yeah, we're gonna play the video.
Okay, that's fine.
Again, you were asked by the prosecution as to whether or not you could hear any exchange of words out in the road.
Right.
And you claim you couldn't hear a thing, right?
No, I couldn't hear anything.
I mean, most critically, you certainly didn't hear Jason say anything, right?
I didn't hear either of them say anything.
Okay. So what happened out in that road, in any exchange, you would have no idea.
Not the words, no.
You wouldn't know if there was a threat, right?
I wouldn't know, no.
From your observations, did you see a young lady out there with Jason as well?
No, I did not.
We could set up to. Take it from the beginning where there's actual plowing taking place. That's the jury. I'm going to ask you to, why don't you take a look too, so we're all looking together if we can.
Attorney Assistant, is it set up? I can't tell if you guys.
Yeah, I think you're okay.
No, jurors, seat. Thank you.
Ma'am, just so before we started, that dark mark across the center That's just part of the window, right?
That's just part of the window, yes.
Okay, that doesn't indicate any kind of clearance on the driveway or anything else?
No.
Okay, all right, good. If we could start the video, please. And I'll ask you a few questions as we go, if that's okay. Okay. Did you see that at all from the window?
I wasn't looking out the window at this point when he was plowing.
Okay. Now, would you agree he's not plowing anything in front of your driveway, right?
Not at this moment, no.
Okay. So the first time you see Kyle through the window, his first statement is, "There he goes," right?
Yeah, that's what it looks like on camera, but that's not what I was referring to.
Yeah, that's what it says, and that's what it looks like on camera, right?
Sure, that's what it looks like.
And then the second thing you say shortly after that is, "I hope he doesn't do anything stupid." Right?
Yes, I do say that.
And you refer to the same he, right?
Yes,
And then the last thing you say is, "I hope he doesn't do anything fucking dumb."
right. I do say that as well.
And as we look through that entire video, and now that you've seen it and it's fresh in your mind.
Yep,
Fresh in your mind,
yes.
you will agree with me that Jason plowed no snow in front of your driveway.
He might have stopped his plow at the telephone pole, but every time he piled more snow, it pushed the snowbank in front of my driveway.
And I'm sure the jury will take a very close look at that video.
I'm sure they will too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just briefly, look, I don't want to belabor this plowing thing too much, okay?
Right.
But I just got to ask you, you saw these kind of 4 swipes towards your pole.
Sure.
Do you know the sequence of Mr. Levesque's plowing of his own driveway?
What
You
do
know, in other words, do you know what was going to happen to the,
It's straight speculation.
sure. You had mentioned a prior kind of plowing incident that
Yes.
raised some tensions.
Right.
Did that prior plowing event actually come to an end? Did he finish plowing?
He did finish plowing.
Okay. Did it appear that he had finished plowing in the video that you saw?
No, he was not done plowing.
Okay. Candidly, those are all the questions I have.
When was that other thing, so we could be real accurate?
I couldn't tell you the exact date.
Thank you.
All set, thank you.
Yes.
And thank you for your time.
Judge, we have another witness available. I don't know what the court's plan is in terms of brief morning break. Thank you.
Please rise.
Jury departing.
Capacity of the victim to actually speak in clear terms is likewise depicted both physically and by audio in this particular image. In other words, he's able to kind of articulate through grunts that he's shot in the face, but these are hardly associated with, I think, the aggressive screams that were depicted or claimed by the defendant in his interview. So for those 3 reasons, notwithstanding the graphic nature of these images, it's the state's position that they're highly relevant and more so than prejudicial.
First of all, thank you very much. We are beneficial. It's a really good traffic. I will stipulate that the bottom injury back this morning. I've shown a series of photographs by the state. I agree with them to put it in to help show it. Kyle, I'll put it up. Every specific wound. The issue of the gravity of the injuries is not at the speech at all. The body cam, and we're going to have to watch it when they get from my voice, but the body cam is unbelievably prejudicial. And the situation can be adequately explained by the witness himself when he takes the stand. In other words, what that body cam is do, it's nothing more, in essence, describe all the injuries he wants, but watching an individual riding around on the ground, and watching the bloody details of ripping off his clothes, it's not, it's nothing more than just kind of prejudicial. It's outrageously prejudicial. Frankly, it's irrelevant at this point in time. We agreed that he had serious bodily injury. We agreed on opening that it was a miracle, that it was extraordinary medical procedures. We went through the whole thing. Okay? I agreed about the injuries. I agree that they were caused by bullet wounds. I agree he was in dire straits. I agree that he had to go to hospital. I agree he had to be treated at the scene. I agree he had to be treated at 3 different hospitals. I mean, it's just, frankly, overdone. When you see it, you know it's done.
And I'll again reiterate, the defense starts out with it's prejudicial. It's got to be unfairly so. And there has to then be this additional balancing with probative aspects of this evidence as well. It may be prejudicial in the sense that it advances the state's case, but it is not unduly prejudicial. And to the extent that, again, that the defense characterizes as unfair by its graphic nature, that is the nature of this case. And they brought certain issues into, heightened scrutiny by making such claims as he could have killed him if he wanted to, as in suggesting that these sort of were, only partway there. And the other one is, hey, he got what he deserved. In other words, you got to weigh out the words that he made, and the defense wants to focus heavily on that, but now start to discount, filter, and really whitewash the consequences, which are what he deserved. Let's see what he deserved. It's depicted here. And then again, I do want to stress the importance of the fact that he really is diminished in terms of his ability to yell in any kind of threatening manner, which is something that the defendant stated during his police interview immediately after these events. And that's from the first shot, which I got to say, again, raises a focused probative value here, a heightened probative value. And I think the court can make appropriate limiting instructions that, this is not about passion or, other factors, but is only considered for the relevance of contested issues. If the defense wants a limiting instruction, the court can take that avenue. But we have, by the way, filtered this jury, addressed this jury from the get-go about their capacity to see and hear and weigh graphic evidence. And this is what we're talking about.
No, this is not what we were talking about. What we were talking about were the specific injuries. And by the way, each and every one of the contentions that was just made by the prosecution can be made out by those photographs and the actual observations of the medical personnel at the scene. You don't need to see a human being being stripped in the snowbank with blood all over the place, all right, and emergency medical techniques being performed. You don't need that in order to buttress the argument that he was in extremely serious physical condition. And by the way, nobody was there at the time when the immediate gunshot took place, or whether or not he was able to articulate at the time. I agree, he couldn't articulate 3 or 4 minutes later. If that's a bonus contention, take it. It doesn't make any difference to me. Okay? Doesn't make any difference to the case. But what I'm saying is that you don't have a 702 expert coming in here who is a detective in a police department or a fire department that's saying 4 or 5 minutes ago they wouldn't be able to talk, right? I mean, that's beyond the scope here. I mean, they're not going to
inference they want to draw. That means they will draw on the
but that's the inference they want to draw. But seeing somebody treated afterwards that doesn't maintain that inference. All right. And if you want to backtrack and come to that conclusion, throw a witness on the stand and let's examine the witness.
But even in terms of prejudice, whether it would explain your passion or your sympathy, whether that inflaming the passion or sympathy will override their ability to render their verdict.
That's one. But again, what's the need to show this video? Why do we need to show this video? I am giving a full exhibit agreement to each and every wound on his body. I'm not contest medical synopsis coming in that will indicate the seriousness of the injuries. And
What's the need of the right analysis? I mean, in terms of the safety, is that the case of what they want is long-term therapy, prejudicial or inflammatory or, right?
well, because is it cumulative? All right. There's one question. What is it really saying? It's saying, I am a police officer. I have a body cam. Well, he can testify, all right, to what he saw, what he did. If I cross-examine him and question him, I agree, they can put in any snippets they want from his body cam, his buttresses, his credibility, or his recollection. But I assure you, I'm probably not even going to cross-examine this one.
So, obviously, first step is I need to see the video. I can't make a decision in the vacuum now that I haven't seen it.
Right.
Assess the assess which would be inflammatory or historical prejudice or something. So unfortunately, I'm going to take another little break so that I can do the video. So we can let the jury know when issues come up. We're going to have them hang on for a few more minutes. And then we'll make a decision after that as to whether we're going to get testimony before lunch. Thank you, but I'll decide that in a minute. So what's the easiest way for me to do this video?
Your Honor's preference, I have it hooked up to my computer right now. I can bring it up to the bench and you can do it there. I'm more than happy to do the chambers.
Yeah, I'm taking the chambers, I mean.
First flashback, are you able to play it on your flashback there?
No, I'm going to take your advice. They get each of us.
Your Honor, do you want counsel as well?
Do you think you'd like that? Or I don't think that, but counsel, do you want to be there while I watch the video, or do you?
If there's questions, yeah, I mean, I think we should be back.
Okay. Well, let's go to the chambers, and we will watch the video, and we'll be back. All right. Thank you. You may be seated. So, counsel, over the lunch break, I had the opportunity to do some additional legal research, and think about the matter more. In deciding whether the video can come in, as you're all aware, the issue is whether the probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice. The court in this matter is guided by the Supreme Court analysis in State v. Seymour, 140 New Hampshire 736, which is the leading case on this issue. That case involved the introduction of crime scene video and autopsy photos involving two victims in a double homicide case. And in Seymour, the court noted that one of the central issues in that case was whether the defendant had the requisite intent to commit murder in that case. The court finds that the same issue is very much at play in this case. One of the issues is whether the defendant had the requisite intent. This is an attempted murder case, so actually the state has to prove the actual purpose to commit the crime of murder. The second issue that I think it goes to is whether the level and amount of force used in this case was reasonable and justified. That's the central issue in this case. The video which the court has looked at, it does show the location of the injuries on the defendant. It shows how they affected, on the victim, the alleged victim. It shows how those injuries affected the alleged victim and the level of incapacitation that they caused. And so I think it's relevant, the video, therefore I think it's relevant to both of those issues, whether the defendant has the requisite intent and whether the amount of force is reasonable. The court also agrees to state that the evidence of the alleged victim's inability to speak or yell is somewhat probative of the question of whether the defendant still posed a threat after the first shot was fired. I'll note that the defense appears that they're challenging directly the question whether the state can prove intent in its opening. The defense made that clear. I think the video is also somewhat relevant and shows the precise location where the alleged victim was laying at the time of this incident. It shows the condition of the driveway as well. And so, while the video is disturbing, the court also finds that it's not excessively graphic. It does show some blood. It shows the alleged victim writhing in pain, but it's not shocking in the context, I think, of the other testimony and other images of the video that the jury can see in this case. So overall, based upon that, the court finds that the risk of unfair prejudice by inflaming the jury's passions or sympathy does not substantially outweigh the probative value, and for all of these reasons to allow the video in. With the caveat that we discussed off the record in chambers, that I don't think anything on that video is relevant beyond the point when the alleged victim is loaded onto the litter, whatever the thing is called, so I would ask that no more that is shown beyond that.
I can assure the court the video has since been shortened to reflect the point for which the victim is put on gurney to go into the ambulance. The last thing you see is the officer taking off his gloves.
Very good. I would ask the defense whether they would like the court to give any sort of limited instruction. Or actually, if you want to make a record, clearly, this is your opportunity to make a record. You'd like to make out.
No, I do appreciate it. I think I've already enunciated that the objections based on Rule 401, 403, cumulative nature of the material, the anticipated introduction of exhibits that are agreed to that would display all of the rules in question, and the fact that there's medical evidence that could be utilized to discuss and discern whether or not the individual could speak of the injury that was sustained, and that there is no need, there's no necessity for that particular material to be placed before the jury. I also want to put in the record that, of course, there should be some type of instruction to the jury prior to this being viewed. However, I also have to also state the caveat that I don't believe any instruction, although I haven't heard the instruction. I certainly can't propose or imagine an instruction that will somehow quell the prejudicial effect of this type of material. I am aware of the C1 data, and I have to say that I believe that this is extremely prejudicial. It's much more graphic and way before the jury. So I do take issue with it, Judge. You've made the ruling. I would like to hear what the court proposes with regard to the instruction.
All right. You don't have any suggestion on that?
I don't think there can be.
Okay. And I think at the very least, I should warn the jury that there's going to be shown video, that it is somewhat graphic. I think at the least I should explain to the jury that one of the things the court is going to instruct them is to decide this case based on the evidence without any sympathy or bias. And the purpose of this video is not to incite any sympathy one way or the other, but it's simply to provide relevant evidence related to the defendant's intent and the level of force in which he used. But I welcome your thoughts on it. Do you think that's an appropriate instruction?
Yeah, I don't think that's an appropriate instruction, especially since you're focusing the jury's attention on particular areas that we should reflect on with regard to the content.
Okay. And
My recommendation, Your Honor, is to refer to what I assume will be included in the final instructions, which is that you are not to reach your verdict based on passions, bias, and the standard verbiage in that instruction, and to remind them about that now, and to indicate that they will be seeing essentially graphic images of the injuries and the first responder treatment in this case. I just want to, for the record, indicate the state's position on the cumulative nature. We've referred to photographs taken at the hospital, which is a controlled hospital medical setting. That this imagery here is particularly relevant given its nexus in both time and location to the scene. I think the court has alluded to some of those factors, but I would apply those specifically to the argument about cumulative evidence in this respect. In other respects, Your Honor, I'll defer to the court concerning an instruction.
All right, well, I think that's a good point you've made, and I hear defense counsel, your position on allowing your attention to any particular conclusion or analysis. So I think I will do my instruction to simply remind them we're going to tell them the end of this case, that they're inside this case, not based on passion or sympathy, and then all that you said.
I just want to state for the record that all of the things that were noted by the prosecution with regard to the scene and the location can all be addressed with alternative displays. That is a video. Each moment of that can be isolated as an isolated image. It doesn't have to come in as a video. It comes as still photography. It can come in as single images, and it will speak to all of those things that are concerned with the prosecution.
Well, I understand. I will point out there was a video used in the Seymour case. I think the same argument could have been made in Seymour. It could be still footage from that case as well. But thank you. All right, so I guess my question to the parties is, at what point do you think I should give that instruction? Do you want me to give that? Does it make sense to give it before you call a witness, or should I wait until you get to that point in your examination?
My recommendation, Your Honor, is to provide the instructions as we're setting it up, and I'll otherwise defer to the court.
Okay. I know you don't agree with the instruction at all, but assuming that you have any objections, you can get that point in the proceeding.
As far as the timing, I have no problem. As far as the instruction to the jury.
Understood. I get that. All right, very good. Then let's bring in the jury.
Your Honor, if I could just return the flash drive to
Please. Please rise. Jury entrance. Please be seated. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming back promptly after lunch. I apologize for what ended up being a much longer break than we'd anticipated. Some legal issues came up that had to be decided, and that's sometimes one of the things that happens in these trials. That's blame the court, if anyone, for the delay, because it's court's fault. So with that, state call.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Spencer Williams-Hurley. Williams-Hurley is a hyphenated last name.
Thank you.
Sir, I think you know the witness stand is strictly have you left to the judge. And if you could remain standing and face the judge for your own case.
Right hand, please. Right hand. Sir, you swear any testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the penalty of perjury. You may be seated.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, would you state your name and spell your name for the court reporter, please?
Yes, my name is Lieutenant Spencer Williams-Hurley. My last name is spelled W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S -H-U-R-L-E-Y.
Thank you. You've given us many hints and suggestions, but I'll nevertheless ask for the record. What do you do for work?
I'm a police officer.
And where are you currently?
Currently, I'm a patrol lieutenant with the Rochester Police Department.
And I'd like to ask you to give just a brief overview, if you will, a summary of your professional training and experience.
Strictly regarding law enforcement?
Correct.
Okay. So in 2014, I got hired by the Rochester Police Department, went to the police academy, which is about 4 months long. During that time, I also ended up going to SWAT 1 and 2. I'm a SWAT team leader. And then along with that, I've gone to several medical courses regarding emergency trauma.
And could you describe your progression through rank? You just referred, I think, to yourself as a lieutenant, which is a different change in rank even from the April 4th of last year.
Yep. So initially when I got hired on, I was a patrolman, handling all sorts of various calls, whatever those may be, from stabbing, shootings, assaults, domestic violence, and the normal things that you're familiar with. As a patrol sergeant, you get set in charge of whatever's happening on your shift, right? So you're the ultimate catch for liability, legality, policy violations, things along those lines. And you're kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, the parent of the shift, right? I think almost decision will come through me. As a lieutenant, it's even more so. There's much more of a legal aspect to it as opposed to I'm no longer stopping cars. That makes sense.
Just briefly revisit that. So how long were you stopping cars as a patrol?
So I did that for about 6 years. I was a sergeant for about 1.5 years, and then I became a lieutenant.
And to be clear, my understanding is patrol is a little bit more than just stopping cars. Did you respond to serious offenses over that period?
I've been through everything from attempted homicides, robberies, domestic violence cases, child abuse, child pornography, the litany of good and bad aspects of law enforcement.
All right. And not to get too far in the weeds and to break and move on soon, you had mentioned to the jury that you had gone to the academy before you were hired. Can you just briefly summarize what that means in New Hampshire when an officer goes to the academy?
Yep. So at the time I went through the academy, again, it was 16 weeks. It was a live-in academy, Monday through Friday. You're there the entire time. Think of a less militaristic boot camp. During that time, we have training at all hours, both physical, academic. We have basic first aid. We have more advanced first aid, as well as the investigation of crimes, crime scene management, crime scene processing, mental health, and basically all aspects of our job. Following that, you have the field training period where you're with a senior officer, and that's kind of when you hone those skills in an on-the-job training kind of environment.
And finally, in addition to kind of the strictly law enforcement training experience, do you have additional training and experience that is integrated with, parallel to, relevant to your work in terms of medical training?
Yeah, so prior to becoming a police officer, I was in the military. I was a Navy corpsman for 6 years. What the Navy corpsman is, it's a medical field for both the Navy and the Marine Corps. During my time, I was attached to a Marine Corps infantry battalion that did multiple combat tours with that. That part of that training, we have a 16-week hospital corpsman school. That's where we learn our basic functions in the medical field for the military. Following that, there's an additional 8 weeks of assignment to go to the Marine Corps side of things. During that time, it is entirely battlefield trauma, right? So gunshot wounds, stabbings, explosions, tourniquets, chest seals, trying to keep people alive until we can get them to a higher level of care, like a field hospital or an air medevac. From there, I also went to something called Operational Emergency Medical Skills. That's a 2-week course where we have more non-traditional methodologies for keeping people alive. I'm not going to go into the details of some of it, but it is a very advanced, it is very rigorous, and it is a very intense course where we have everything from your line level people that work in a hospital all the way up to high tier special operations that go through this course. It's a real eye opener for a lot of people. And the main focus of that is being able to keep people alive as long as possible, because if we look at the human body as essentially like a plumbing system, right? How do we keep those pipes intact, right? And running as best as we can. With that, I had multiple combat tours to both Fallujah, Ramadi, and places where there was an extreme amount of combat. As a result, seeing a large number of, battlefield type injuries. I've also taught it hundreds of hours. I probably taught tourniquets more frequently than I've made my own dinner in a lot of ways. I've been teaching thousands of people that for, at this point, probably the last 16 to close to 20 years.
Sir, I'd like to turn your attention to April 4th of last year. Were you on duty?
I was.
And can you, did you become involved in this case, which I think you're familiar with as State versus Jason Levesque?
Yes, we were at the station. I was going over some of the information with my sergeants for how that shift had gone prior to that. And then that's when we heard the call come over both the radio and the overhead dispatch.
And briefly describe your response, if you would.
I found that the other sergeants that were with me that night, because some of them were in a shadowing period, and we headed directly to that call.
Well, just, we may see some body cam, so just can you clarify that shadowing period, what are you talking about?
Yep, so similar, remember how I said that after the academy, we go through a field training period. So when someone gets promoted from patrolman to sergeant, they'll spend a little bit of time with either a senior sergeant or a lieutenant, kind of just showing, I think of it almost like an FTO period, but it's not about how to do the job. It's more about the nuances of that position, right? So who we're going to be notifying in certain situations, the requirements of them changes from when they're a patrolman, right? It's more the overall scene as opposed to an individual task more often than not.
And I'm sorry for that kind of side piece there. I just want to return to April 4th. You said that you received a call. What was the nature of the call?
From what I remember, it said that, so someone had called in and said that there were 4 shots and that their boyfriend was shot in the face. And usually when a call comes in, we only get a little snippet of the conversation that person had either with a 911 dispatcher or with our dispatcher.
How quickly did you respond after receiving that call?
Instantly. Matter of seconds.
And do you know whether other officers responded potentially before you even?
They did. Yep. So as we were leaving the building, you could already hear lights and sirens, well, the sirens, leaving the parking lot, heading in that direction.
Would you please offer us a narrative of the events, your actions that you took from this point moving forward, please?
Yep. So as soon as I got with my other sergeants, we got into the supervisor's vehicle. The drive was very short. We're talking maybe a quarter of a mile in reality. Light sirens as fast as we could, got over there. As I'm pulling up, I could see officers taking a man in custody at gunpoint. At that point, my focus is I have 2 sergeants with me. I know exactly how they're going to handle this situation. I know that I have an experience in medical, and I'm going to take advantage of that at that time. So we had already kind of distributed tasks while we were driving up there, and then I immediately started looking for who may plead with a potential victim.
Were you able to find who you later learned to be KYAL VIOLETTE at the scene?
I did.
Can you describe where it is you found them?
On the sidewalk, kind of between a snowbank, there's the height of the snowbank and the nature of the light, and there was a storm going at the time. Was kind of hiding in a little bit of shadow, so at first it didn't quite register what was there. But I saw him laying on his back, head towards me, and I could see a fair amount of blood both on the sidewalk and on the snowbank beside me.
And after identifying somebody clearly in need of medical attention, what did you do?
Started trying to treat. So putting on gloves at that point in time, because again, if I don't know that person, we have to provide basic, protection for ourselves as well. So I started applying gloves. And then at that point, part of the treatment is trying to expose the wounds as much as possible to see exactly what we're dealing with.
Were there other officers adjacent or assisting you in this process?
There were.
And can you then describe for us, just with a narrative, what it is you did, what it is you saw?
Yep. So when I started, so right off the bat, the obvious injuries, there was a wound to the left side of the jaw, which was very clearly a bullet hole. It also looked as though the round might have been lodged higher up in the cheek. As I exposed the torso, I started seeing a couple different holes, one on the lower right abdomen, one on the left rib cage, one on the upper part of the body near the collarbone on the left-hand side. We started trying to see what we're going to do for treatment of that. I couldn't see anything clearly that would say an extremity hemorrhage that would be like a tourniquet or something along those lines. So the idea is, if you kind of look at the torso, when there's a bleed or there's a hole there, the idea is you're trying to plug that hole as quick as possible. So Your gloved hand will go over something like that. It prevents, one, oxygen from going into the cavity in case the lung collapses, and it also tries to prevent as much blood as possible from coming out. So if you think of it like a water balloon with small holes in it, you're trying to plug those holes as best as possible.
And you just described, by my count, 1, 2, 3, 4 wounds. Did you examine the lower part of his body? Were you able to do that at the scene, given the time and circumstances?
No. We were able to get a rough idea of how much blood might have been there, and there was nothing to indicate at the time an arterial bleed that would have needed immediate attention, as opposed to the things more at the realm of his lungs. I also knew that we had EMS fairly quickly on the way. He was laying in the snow at that point in time, so there is an element of keeping them out of the snow and trying to keep them as warm as possible, given the scenario.
Can you tell us about any actual steps, interventions you took medically to either stabilize or to address the wounds that you did see?
Yep. So right off the bat, as I said, we're trying to keep as much of the fluid in the body and as much air out of the body as possible. So right off the bat, you go ahead and you cover those holes with a hand, gloved hand, things along those lines. When I lifted up his shirt and we started cutting away the shirt, I saw a hole up in the upper collarbone. My concern at that point in time is directly in that area, you have the subclavian vein, which is like a garden hose of a vein, where if that gets nicked, it can actually bleed quite profusely. When doing that, I actually take my fingers, which are gloved, and stick them into the wound to try to feel if I can see if there's blood coming from a particular location. That's also a benefit, because it's kind of like the little boy sticking his finger in the well. We're trying to keep everything in there, and that's, frankly, a good way to do it. When we do that, I roll him over, and try and check to see if there's any exit wounds. Again, at this point, we just know somebody was shot. I don't necessarily know the caliber. I don't know the power. I don't know if there is going to create an exit wound or if it's going to stay inside the body. So we're at least going to check. Didn't notice anything on the back, but that's also when we started noticing something on like the lower hip. Eventually, we also roll him over onto the side because he does have blood going into his mouth. I don't want him aspirating or bringing that into his lungs. So by allowing him to lay on his side as long as possible, it allows the blood to come out of the mouth and maintain an airway so that he can continue to try to talk and continue to breathe on his own.
At this juncture, while you were making these observations and interventions, are you making determinations about exit wounds and entry wounds, or not at this point?
Yes. So this is a constant evaluation. Again, this is one of those things that happens in the dark during a blizzard. A lot of things going on at one time that are kind of dividing attention. So it's a constant reevaluation. So one, are things that we are doing working? Also, are there new information that we're getting, such as locating an exit wound? Or from the time I got there to the time we are at that moment, has additional blood pooled up in the area? So it's a constant evaluation, both of those reasons. And then if we do something, which in one case we started putting chest seals on, which think of it like a plastic dressing, right? Nothing can get in or out of it. By putting those on, making sure that those are working as well and they're staying in place.
So were you wearing a body-worn camera while you responded to this scene?
I was. It sits right here.
Is it on now?
No. No, but it does sit right there.
All right. Look, would seeing the images from your body-worn camera accurately depict some of these issues you've described and the degree and nature of these injuries?
Yes.
Your Honor, David?
Yeah.
We'd like to shift to it.
Sure. So while we're doing that, I'd like to do instructions because I anticipate the children will see part of this video. And I want to warn you, this video does contain some graphic images. But as you will be told at the end of this case, part of my instruction is going to be that you are not to decide this case based upon passion or sympathy or emotion, but you're to decide this case based upon the facts and the law. And to the extent that seeing any of this arouses any sympathy or passion or emotion, I'm going to ask you to set those feelings aside, and that you are not to rely upon any such feelings or sympathy or bias or emotion in reaching your verdict at the end of this case. Your verdict is to be based on facts and upon the law. All right, and with that, we will continue on.
Sir, Your Honor, with the court's permission, may this witness step into the well?
Yes, and I will move myself.
Your voice seems to carry quite well. I want you to provide a mic possibly to assist the court recorder. This may be another situation, Your Honor, where the lights would help.
The counsel, because this is innocent for ID, correct?
I construed your order, Your Honor, as a full.
Out to the person that just gave us a super chat. This community is just the best. Love you all the different.
I understand, Your Honor. Thank
Thank
you. Lieutenant, we're showing you an initial still frame. Can you identify that?
Yes, so that would be Summer Street to the right. There's a victim sitting right there. That's a snowbank next to them.
Victim, you just used the term right there. Can I, for the record, just clarify, appears to be in the sidewalk area adjacent to both a house and a utility pole?
Yes.
Okay. And this is essentially, you just pointed out your body worn camera, the perspective of you on this scene, literally the view from your chest. Counsel, I'd ask you to flip.
Sorry, can we hold that for 1 second? Can you stop the video for a second? Thank you. Counsel, do you want to make the record, or do you want?
No, I mean, I just want to make sure we're clear here. This is still ID that's being played to the jury.
Right.
The ID has a strict commitment.
Correct. Before you go any further.
I understand. So, sir, does this appear to be a fair and accurate representation depicted by your body-worn camera?
Yes, this is the same thing.
That body-worn camera, can you confirm the protocol in terms of preserving it for evidence?
Yes, so the moment that we finish up any type of call, basically a couple things happen. So when we shut this off, it asks us to save it as a particular type of file. So it could be accidental, a traffic stop, a case file, or something like that. I select case file, because it's going to go into a case. And then when we get back to the station, it gets uploaded basically into the cloud, into our servers, and then we can assign that specifically to a case with a particular case number that has a unique identifier.
And did you take those steps in this case?
I did.
Your Honor, I move to strike the ID and move this video in as a full exhibit.
Any objection?
With the same reservations and with the same instructions.
Understood. The ID will be stricken as a full exhibit.
Thank you. Counselor?
No, I need you to stay just like that. I need you to stay. Yeah. Okay. You got another? I'm gonna get back in. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna get taser. Okay. Do you have everything on the front? Hey, I'm gonna roll you onto your back. Okay. Move your legs. Move your legs. Move your legs. Okay. Roll on this side. What else we got? So I'm gonna go ahead and keep this one covered. Okay. Hey, abdomen, got the abdomen as well. Right here. Yep. Let's go right here. Okay. Sorry, buddy. Sorry, right here. Take that out. Hold on, buddy. Can we get a little bit of gauze? So do we have to get gauze? Put on his head. No, one leg. Should we guys have that? Hey, you got your leg? Can you go ahead and rest the shirt, please? That's fine. Grab that, Sarah. I just need someone to start cutting the rest of the shirt. Okay? Yep. Man, you need to back up.
Stand back, sir. Don't move.
Back up.
Stand by the building, please. I'm going to stand by the building. Jason.
Stand back here.
Hey, we're going ahead. We're helping you out. We're helping you out. Okay?
EMS is on their way.
Hey, make sure his head gets up to the side.
Just gotta put your head to the side.
Get your mouth. Get your
I hear a voice in the background and you directing to turn him onto his side. Can you explain why you were doing that?
Yes. So as you can see, especially from the beginning of the video towards this point, because he's laying on his back, that some of the blood is draining into his mouth. And you can see when he starts to talk, it starts to kind of come down his cheek. My idea is when you roll onto his side, it allows that to drain. Typically with chest injuries, we try to be careful with how we're going to be moving somebody, because especially if it's bleeding internally, we have to watch which way that blood is going to start pulling inside the body. So while we're applying these things, while we're cutting his shirt off, we don't want to lay on his side, because again, we have a hook that's ripping his clothes. I don't want to accidentally do that. So as long as we can keep on his back, we're going to, and then once we start seeing a little bit of blood forming, I'm moving him onto his side in order to allow that blood to come out.
There has been, I think, some reference to packing injuries. I note that there was some attention drawn to the abdomen. What does that mean to pack a wound?
So when we start talking, especially when like the hips, the shoulders, and those kind of areas, something like a tourniquet's not going to work, right? It doesn't have an ability to squeeze the blood vessel against the bone to shut off the blood flow. So we have to find alternative methods. When I first was able to lift the shirt up, and I noticed one of his collars, I see my hand move up, and I actually stick my fingers into the wounds to try to do exactly that. I'm trying to provide pressure inside the wound to prevent it from further bleeding. That's not a thing that I can reasonably continue to do for a long period of time, right? Unless I followed him all the way to the hospital and the surgery room, that's not going to work. So the idea is that we would take something like gauze, right, or specifically something called combat gauze, which has an anticoagulant in it, it actually has a clotting agent embedded in the gauze. And what we do is we pack it and try to fill that space up as much as possible to prevent that bleeding. Otherwise, if that bleeding continues, it continues to form inside the body, pulling like a traditional internal bleed that you would think. And that might require, and that was always, requires surgical intervention to get it to stop, at risk of continuing to bleed on the sharp.
Councilman, can you please?
All right, roll on this side as soon as that's clear. Okay. So I'm gonna roll. Yep. So I'm gonna do this and cover here. Good. Keep your mouth open. All right. Any blood, we're gonna go ahead and let it roll out of your mouth. All right, buddy. I don't see anything here. Go ahead and get your mouth open.
He has an
No, they don't know.
Oh, his jaw.
Yeah, that's okay though. That's okay. Let's see anything else here. Oh, hold on, buddy.
Try and stay still, okay?
So we have a shut nose up to the upper chest.
And then
One of the
lower abdomen.
We also have the lower abdomen.
No, please sit there.
And once you get your neck one, you start setting up tape.
I have one.
Okay, ready? Okay, so that's that one. Yep, so we got one on the abdomen. There's one on my hand as well. My right hand, but it's covered up by the sweatshirt. Okay, so it just has one to the face. Yeah, there's one to the face and the jaw. Okay. Okay. So I would have a chance to get over those two. Yeah. What's your name? Okay.
Hi, Wilson.
I guess my pocket.
Hey, stay with me, okay? Just stay with me, all right? Yes, ma'am. Okay? Just stay with us, okay? EMS is here, all right?
So can you, with your left hand, can you go ahead and slide his arm out of the sweatshirt?
Ma'am, you need to stop asking us questions right now. Okay, he's still breathing. I'll put his lower abdomen and his jaw. His left side of his Turn your head for me.
So we're leaving him on the side, so you can cut that drain out. Yeah. Okay. I don't see the accident move factor at all. We haven't really checked the other side, but we have enough pressure with the blood there. So I can get through. Get right under my hand.
There's one under the case.
So you need another. There's a chest right behind you, right there. There's one extra in there, right up, no left, right there.
Yep, right there.
And there's probably some stuff in there if you need it, but stay in your house, sir. Stay in your house. In the first aid bag on either the left-hand side or right-hand side. Stay, no, you're gonna be okay, all right? Just stay with us. They're here. They're gonna help you. That's fine. We have Rochester. We have some on the truck. So we're gonna lift you, okay?
Okay, I'll hold it his head. But yes, I'll be on that fifth arm. 1, 2, 3. You want to slide further down? His head hang low. Let's look up right under it here as well. But there's nothing, I couldn't feel any kind of pressure from the middle.
So what can we
Thank you, Your Honor. Certainly. I'll ask it this way, why did you do the things you did there in this instance?
They would have been medically necessary. If in a lot of those circumstances, especially the abdomen bleed or the upper chest bleed, one of the concerns that we have is like most things, when there's that initial impact of a high velocity bullet, right? The body does have a mechanism of self-protection, right? Muscles are going to, it's almost like when you hit your elbow really hard on the table, right? Because the muscle contracts. And what can that happen is that can prevent blood flow from going for a little while. But when the body starts to relax or you've lost enough blood, it then opens up like floodgates. So those kind of interventions are medically necessary to keep a person alive long enough to be able to actually get to a hospital.
I was going to ask, to what degree of medical necessity, but you just stated that this was to keep him alive.
Yes.
Do you consider that a fair assessment based on your training experience and what you witnessed there?
I did.
We just watched, I believe, the very end of that. The video depicts you transferring this patient now to EMS, right?
Yes.
And at that point, did your involvement medically essentially cease?
Correct.
Can you just briefly summarize then your involvement following Mr. Violette being taken to the hospital?
Yep, I assisted in cordoning off the area. I contacted the support captain to try to get our detective bureau started to come out, because at that point, our main focus is scene security. I don't want anyone in or out. I want to preserve the scene as much as possible and then pass it on to a higher level investigation, because the amount of time necessary to further this goes often beyond the capabilities of patrol, and we want to move it to our detective bureau.
Did you participate in or make any orders to protect the integrity of the scene?
Besides further or improving the tape barrier, nope. Sergeant Smith was able to handle the majority of that.
You're the first person to refer to the tape barrier, so can you just clarify that?
Yep, so it's just your traditional crime scene tape around the outside. The idea is we make it as large as possible because we can always shrink it after the fact. And that was one of the things that I had done, is make the scene larger to make sure we isolate as much of the original evidence as possible.
And following your efforts to communicate information on to detectives, secure the scene, did you play any additional role that night?
No.
And essentially, it sounds like you passed it on to the detectives. Did they show up?
They did.
Okay.
They better.
We could just have them. Sir, thank you for your time. Attorney Sisti, I think you've met, had some questions as well.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First, I just want to say that was a really great job you guys did.
Thank you.
And your community should be really proud, honestly.
Thank you very much.
During the course of the emergency treatment there, and you explained it great to the jury, we were hearing Kyle say things to you. And that's generally a very good thing to hear when you're in that situation, correct?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
He was responding to some of the things you were saying, right?
Correct.
What kind of things was he responding to, just so we can get a better idea?
Well, one of the main focuses is when we talk to people, one is to reassure them, that helps stave off shock a little bit. It also, you want people to continue to have the will to fight, to go further. So by constantly reassuring, you keep that interaction. It also allows me to establish the integrity of his airway, right? Because if he can talk, I understand that at least something can go in and out, right? And then also, a lot of times what we'll do is people know where they've been hurt. So especially in the beginning of the video, you hear him repeatedly say, my face, my face, my face.
Okay, so he was, thank God, he was conscious, and he was at least responding to some degree.
Yes.
He was able to articulate certain aspects of his injuries and point that point to where he believed he was shot.
Correct.
And that was 7 minutes or so, and he was able to sustain, it wasn't a great level of communication, but some level of communication all the way until loading him onto the ambulance.
Yes, and that's pretty common, especially with gunshot wound victims in the torso, is they usually stay conscious.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thanks again.
Absolutely.
The fact that he could say the way he said it, I mean, we could hear it, the way he said, my face, my face. Does that change your view at all about the likelihood he would die if there wasn't serious medical intervention?
It's not so much exactly what he's saying, but it's how what he says changes over time. In the beginning, he was saying, my face, my face, my face. When he's rolled onto his side, it eventually changed to, I'm dying. And what that is as one of a big symptom of something called tension pneumothorax, which is where the lung collapses and pressure slowly builds up in that chest cavity, which is one of the main reasons why we covered that wound to prevent air from going in, is this sense of impending doom. Right? So this anxiety, because slowly you're losing the ability to take full breaths. You're not getting as much oxygen. You've lost blood, so you're not able to get it enough through your tissues, right? The perfusion of oxygen through your tissues. So what happens is it's a slow onset of anxiety that's very common with both bleeding out and with severe trauma where you're slowly suffocating to death.
Those are my questions.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Steve, your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Officer Tiana Adams.
Officer, you're probably aware the witness stand is to the left of the judge. If you can approach the witness stand, face the judge, and remain standing for your oath, please.
You raise your right hand. You swear that any testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under the pain and penalty of perjury. You may be seated. Counsel, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Officer Adams.
Good afternoon.
This may seem a little bit obvious, given both your title and what you're currently wearing, but can you tell us a little bit about what you do for work?
Yes, I work for the Rochester Police Department in the patrol division.
How long have you worked there?
Been hired for approximately 2 years now.
2 years. So last April, around when this incident occurred, had you been there for a full year at that point?
On the road by myself, no. Hired, almost, yes.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that. Can you just explain the distinction?
Yes, of course. So you go through a long hiring process, background checks, stuff like that, and that sometimes it takes a few months. Then you do some training in-house with the police department, and then you go to the academy and you go through the academy for a period of 16 weeks, and then you do field training on the road with a field training officer for approximately 3 months, and then you get released on your own.
So I just want to clarify, because I think I may have gotten lost. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. April 4th of last year, were you on your own?
Yes, I was.
You were on your own?
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying. Was that a new development for you in your career, or had you been there for a little bit?
Yes, it was. I was on my own for maybe a month at that point.
Were you on duty and working on April 4th, 2024?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall what shift you were working?
I was on the midnight shift.
Do you recall responding to the area of 4143 Summer Street?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got called out to that address?
I don't recall who exactly called me. I just know that I went into shift early and was asked to head out to that address to assist with whoever needed assistance.
When you responded to the call, when you got told to go out there, did you know the situation that you were responding to?
I didn't know many details, no. I knew that an incident had occurred and go touch base with one of the sergeants on scene to see where I was needed.
We all kind of visited a couple of days ago or yesterday. The address is in question. How far is it approximately from the police station?
I don't know exactly, maybe a minute, not even response time.
Is it fair to say it didn't take you very long to get there?
Correct.
Once you arrived there, can you tell us a little bit about what you saw?
So I didn't really see 41 or 43. I went and touched base with my sergeant, and then my sergeant had me go do a different project.
So I just want to clarify, were you kind of on the street at that point? Did you get to the general street of Summer Street?
Yes, I did, yes.
Okay. You said your sergeant did, I'm sorry, I just want you to, if you could repeat yourself on that. What did your sergeant ask you to do?
I went and spoke with my sergeant. Her and I walked to one of the neighboring houses to speak with the neighbors about the incident that occurred.
Do you recall which address that was?
I don't, unfortunately.
That's okay. Did you, at the time of this incident, draft a report?
Yes,
part
I
of your
did.
duties as a police officer?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of the report?
We document what we saw when we arrived, the date that it occurred on, what officers write in the report, the address we respond to, who we speak to, what they said, if we got any footage or videos we include in our report, say it's attached to the case and information like that.
Would the address that you responded to be included in your report?
Yes, it would.
If I showed you a copy of that report, would it make you refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Page 6, counsel.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I approach? Thank you. Officer Adams, I'm showing you a copy of your report from that night. You mind just briefly reviewing it? I believe it is the second paragraph and just, does that help refresh your recollection of the address that you responded to?
Yes, it does.
And what address is that?
I responded to 41, and part of my report says I went to 38.
When you went to 38 Summer Street, can you tell us a little bit about what you did once you got there?
Yes, so upon approach, I observed a ring camera. I knocked on the door and I spoke with the resident. My sergeant started speaking with her about the incident that had occurred, asked her a few questions if she had heard anything like that. And then we asked to see her ring camera footage.
Did you personally view that footage? With
Yes.
the camera?
Yes, I did.
If I were to show you that footage, would you be able to identify it?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I believe we will need to set up for another view. Thank you. Officer, Bill, bear with us for a moment. Counsel, this is yes.
We may shift it.
Yeah.
This is actually just audio. Oh, yeah.
We're just moving because of the obstruction, Judge, that's all.
Yes.
Your Honor, with permission, I would step down. Sarah, can you just briefly step down from the witness stand? Thank you.
Can count this as a full exhibit?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Officer Adams, I'm showing you right now, it is a essentially still shot at the very beginning of a video. Does this look familiar to you? How do you recognize this video? Now, I just want to be clear, this ring camera footage, does this show you the specific address of 41 or 43 Summer Street?
It's next door.
What, based on your review of this, were you able to determine in reviewing this video?
I compared the argument and the shots that were fired.
Is this how you recall seeing the video when you viewed it? Officer Adams, after you viewed this footage from the resident of 38 Summer Street, what did you then do?
I asked her if she was willing to send it to me via text or email, and she agreed to do so.
She did do so. Did that conclude your involvement? Apologies, you can return. Your Honor, this concludes our use of the television for this particular
Very
case.
good, thank you.
Officer Adams, I'll re-ask my questions that I interrupted myself a little bit there. Did that conclude your involvement that evening for the purpose of investigation for this incident?
I spoke with the resident and her son from that location. I went back to the police department and I sat in the lobby with the suspect's daughter while she waited to be interviewed with detectives, and that was my end of my involvement.
I just want to clarify, did you personally interview?
I did
his
not.
daughter?
No, I did not.
After her interview was concluded, did you have any further involvement?
I did drive her home, yes.
Did that ultimately end your involvement?
Yes, it did.
Just a moment, Your Honor. Right. Officer Adams, I have no further questions for you. I imagine defense may have a few.
Counsel, questions?
Just a couple. Let me ask you something. You said you heard an argument and you heard gunshots.
In the video, yes, I did.
Yeah, okay. You didn't hear what was said prior to the gunshot.
I did not know, not in that particular video, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further?
Just very briefly, Your Honor. I just want to clarify, when you say you heard arguments, was that the kind of noise that we heard just prior to the gunshot?
The conversation afterwards is what I was speaking about.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay, you can be excused, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. State would call Detective Kyle Danie to stand.
Very good. Sorry. No, my bad. I think we're gonna take our afternoon break. We've been going about an hour. I try not to go too much more than an hour's spell. So we're gonna take our afternoon break. I'm gonna try to keep this one short though, so we can keep it 7 minutes. That would be great. And then we can come back. All right? Very good.
Please rise.
Your departure.
Mark, just to be totally transparent about what we're going to do. We have what we're not going to do, so that idea. The rest of it is just, we're going to talk about. Yeah.
So then you were able to hold the audio of this thing.
Not, it's not. Not,
Oh,
the rest of it. Yes. And just making them.
So I can,
Good.
I will ask. So I'll ask my approach. I understand this. Just the rest of the court. And go ahead. So we get lost. Court TV or the cameraman did me the courtesy of asking whether they were allowed to publish, apparently they were able to capture some portions of the video that was played, the medical video. And they pointed out that there is no standing order in this case. I conferred with counsel. Both counsel's position is that it unnecessarily raises issues to publish something of that nature during the pendency of the trial. To be quite candid, it's not an issue that I did research prior to this case, or when the issue came up, which was just minutes ago. But my bottom line approach to this kind of issue is I don't want to create any problems. We've got two alternates. I fully respect First Amendment issues, press rights. There are limitations, however, and I'll defer to the defense in terms of their concern.
Yeah, the position is that further that not take place and that there been fourth jury trial, 4 weeks, 2 of them in this trial. I think we should protect what we have right now and make sure that we run it tighter. I don't think there's a need for additional publication. I don't have a problem with anybody who's cooperating or see what they can see, vantage points in which they stand, but to create that vantage point is possibility. Potential for some harm. I kind of agree with that. I think that given the particularly graphic nature of that footage that was shown, I would prefer it not be published to the world at this point. I do understand the First Amendment issue involving the public right to access the courtroom. You should be in a position to see whatever someone in the public will be allowed to see if they hear. But I would prefer that not risk any future presidential events.
I construe your preference as an order, Your Honor.
Are they looking for the order?
They just refer to the fact that there was not an order that they referred to as generally present in these types of matters.
I'm not aware of the standing order from this court involving.
I'm not either.
What court we can or not. I know there's conversations and negotiations between the clerk's office, the administrative office of courts, who's dealt with their access, and so I'm not aware of any standing order. So that's where it's involved. I don't want to create a problem either way. I don't want to create unnecessary litigation either way on this project. No one has.
Well, I can say, Judge, that nobody was placed on notice, prior to the trial. I'd be happy to litigate it pre-trial, but we're in the middle of this thing right now.
And how is the question posed to
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I was curious how the question was posed to the state on this issue of the publication of the video.
I just approached him after, and I didn't have a straight-on shot of it. It was an angled shot, and it wasn't great. But I just don't want any issues.
So I think you heard me. My preference would be that video not be shared online. I'm not. And so I'm asking to request this I'm not ordering this. And we're not part of the
Horse may be out of the barn in that they were streaming live.
Yeah, it's already streamed live. So I construe the question to be somehow there's an issue in the future if there were complaining. It's already done. And as I said, they have the same access to the phone. All right, so I'm going to leave you for the briefing on that. So the briefing is ready. For everyone, we're going to agree. Please rise, jury enters.
Judge, I think we announced that Danie was our next witness, but I'd like to retract that and call Kim Edwards, please.
All right, very good. Come on up here again. Good afternoon. You raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and the things that will be the truth. Seated. Ask you to scoot up to the microphone there, keep your voice up so everyone can hear. Counsel, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you state your name, please, and spell it for the court recorder?
Yep, it's Kimberly Edwards, Kimberly Edwards.
What do you do for work?
What was that?
What do you do for work?
I'm a national registered paramedic at Frisbie Memorial Hospital.
I think our conversation can be relatively brief, but if you could indulge us in a summary of your training and experience and your history of work in this area.
Yep. So I started in the medical field in the military. I was in the military for 8 years, and I worked at a hospital for 8 years, for 4 years with the military, increasing my medical knowledge. When I got out of the military, I joined EMS, and I started as a EMT basic for 2 years and another 3 years as an advanced EMT. And since then, I've been working as a paramedic.
And you say as a paramedic, is there a distinction between paramedic, EMT?
Yep, so as a basic EMT, you can give minimal drugs such as oxygen and aspirin. And as you advance your career, you can give more medications and do more interventions. As an advanced EMT, you can start an IV, give some saline if the patient needs it, if they're dehydrated or whatnot. And as a paramedic, we can do more medication, more life-saving medications and interventions, to include taking someone's airway if they were to lose their airway.
Did you respond to the area of 4341 Summer Street on April 4th last year?
I did.
And what was the nature of that call?
So that evening, we got dispatched for multiple gunshot wounds. We arrived on scene to find a patient on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds.
Do you have an estimate of how long it took you to respond to the scene, to arrive at the scene from the time you took the call?
I believe it's about a mile, so it was probably only 2 minutes at most.
Very well. And did you, in fact, attend to a patient at the scene and transport that individual to Frisbie Memorial Hospital?
Yes, I did.
Can you just please summarize what you saw and what you did during that period of time?
Yep. So when we arrived on scene, PD was rendering medical care along with controlling the scene. So the officer that I took report from had already placed 2 chest seals to the patient. He said that there was multiple other wounds. He did not at the time have a count, due to it being dark out and the patient being fully clothed. At that time, there were many people there, a lot of people that were distraught and upset. And my partner and I felt that the scene wasn't very secure enough to be able to do a adequate enough assessment on this patient. So we deemed it very necessary to extricate the patient as quick as possible and get him in the back of the ambulance. So we did so. My partner and I, with the assistance of PD, lifted the patient onto the stretcher and put him in the back of the ambulance, where we were able to fully unclothe the patient and find that he had approximately 7 gunshot wounds to his body in multiple locations. At that time, the patient was able to speak to us in very gargled and incomplete sentences. He had blood coming from the airway that we were suctioning throughout our transport to the hospital. We had the decision to either continue on to Portsmouth, where he would get definitive care, or take him to a closer hospital, so that way he could get emergent care and stabilize him. Due to the amount of wounds and the copious amount of blood that he had lost at that time, we did take him to Frisbie Hospital to receive emergent stabilizing care.
And so what was the kind of amount of time you spent from the scene to Frisbie, which is somewhat nearby?
Maybe 10 minutes.
And can I ask you then, and I'll follow up if you feel like additional detail is needed, but can you summarize, you said you saw 7 gunshot wounds. Does your reference to gunshot wounds include entry and exit wounds? Are you even making that determination?
I'm not making the determination of exit wounds and whatnot, because.
Can you briefly summarize for the jury the observations in terms of wounds and his medical condition that you observed during that some 10-minute period of time?
Yeah, so he had a collapsed lung due to a gunshot wound to the upper left-hand side. He had multiple gunshot wounds to his buttocks and down in his genital area. He had one going through his jaw and lodged into the other side of the jaw, which was making it difficult to get the blood out of his airway and making it difficult for us to, if we needed to, take his airway and breathe for him.
And any other treatment that you provided that you have?
Just wound care, stop the bleeding of some of the other wounds that we had found during the transport, suctioning and keeping his airway clear and open. We did attempt to do vital signs. We were only able to get his heart rate and his oxygen saturation due to the patient being just unable to sit still due to the amount of pain and anxiety that he was in at the time. So he was flailing around and we weren't able to get a blood pressure, which made it unsafe for us to continue on to Portsmouth at that time. We attempted an IV, but it got torn out on the way into the hospital. So that was all the care that we were able to render at the time.
You described your patient, Mr. Violet, as being anxious and having a hard time being still. Is he conscious through this process?
He was conscious and aware that he had been shot, other than saying that I got shot and I'm going to die and giving us his name. He was really not able to say much more than that.
And were you able to successfully transport and just pass on this patient to the emergent care that you just referred to at Frisbie Memorial Hospital?
Yep, we did get him to Frisbie and transfer him to the nurses and physician.
Do you know a doctor named Dr. Freeze at Frisbie Memorial?
Yes.
Are you aware that he was on scene as well?
He was at the hospital.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, if I could just thank you. Those were the questions I had. Attorney Sisti, I'm not sure you've got before, may have some follow-up questions if you like.
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
This time, the state would like to call Kyle Danie to the stand.
Sir, I trust you know where the witness stand is. Approach it, face the judge, and remain standing for your oath, please.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us about what your job is, though I do think I gave it away?
My name is Kyle Danie. I'm employed full-time by the Rochester Police Department. I'm currently a full-time detective there. I've been with the department since 2013, and I've been a detective for about 3 years within the division.
Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your come up to detective, your training and experience, where you started off, a little bit of that background.
Sure. Academy first, field training, eventually solo patrol for a while. Eventually I worked into a community engagement division, into a problem-oriented policing division that kind of focused more on problem chronic issues and narcotics, and then worked my way into detectives. During that time also, around probably 2017, 2018, I began working as almost a specialty position or an extra added position of added responsibilities of working on what we called our evidence team. It was more specialized in if we had a scene that was a little bit larger, officers that were a little bit higher trained in the collection, the preservation of a crime scene, documentation of a crime scene, and then the preservation and collection of evidence.
So I'm glad you brought that.
Yep, yeah, it's Danie, D-A-N-I-E.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm glad you brought up the evidence training. Can you tell us a little bit about the specialized training specifically that you've undergone in terms of collecting evidence, assessing a scene, that whole genre of police investigation?
Sure. Just looking kind of at our training coordinator, I said, hey, can I get my past training on all of evidence? And I'd like to say that it's about a month long of, you know, the 40 hours one week, 40 hours another week. I took a basic 3-week-long training on the collection of evidence, I think from what was called Forensics Training Services, LLC. It's a company that really went from like nuts to bolts of responding to the scene, the preservation of the actual scene itself, and working into photography, different types of things that you might wear to preserve the scene, as well as then working into photographing the scene, collecting those pieces of evidence, and then potentially even examining those pieces of evidence further, whether it's a chemical process, dusting for latent prints with fingerprint powder, as well as other things like that. With that training, I've taken additional crime scene photography trainings, fingerprint trainings. The academy now in New Hampshire is certifying their officers, all the recruits, through a basic crime scene training that's 1 week long. I've also gone back to take that, advanced photography, vehicle processing, and so on that way. We aren't a forensic lab per se. I can process certain pieces of evidence, but at some point we stop and send that to the New Hampshire State Lab for further examination, depending on the piece of evidence and the case.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and then we'll backtrack a little bit just because of talking about your evidence experience. Was part of your role in this investigation processing the scene?
It was.
I'd just like you to tell us a little bit about specifically the role a detective serves at the Rochester Police Department versus, we've heard from sergeants, we've heard from patrol officers, so specifically your duties and responsibilities aside from that evidence collection training that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Rochester, we currently have 7 detectives, there's a couple other open positions, and a detective lieutenant. We do get some cases firsthand, and when I say that, meaning typically your patrol officer is the first to respond to a 911 call. Detectives, though, sometimes might come to a major call out where there's an active scene going on. And so we might respond to those things like drug overdose deaths, homicides, physical assault, sex assaults, things like that, that we would respond out to pretty much on scene if that happened. Otherwise, we're getting a lot of things that were past tense. I'm applying for search warrants. My day-to-day is really interviewing people, developing probable cause, writing search warrants, obtaining the records from different companies, video, things like that, and so on, and building the case over time. Typically something that happened after the fact that I'm following up, sometimes from an initial officer's report or initial sergeant's report.
Thank you, Detective. I appreciate you going through all of that with us. I know it's new to some people in the
Not a problem.
military. So were you working on the day of April 4th, 2024?
I wasn't at the time.
You weren't. Did you end up working on that day?
I did. No.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
I got called in we have 2 detectives that are typically on call just in case no one is in. I got a call saying, hey, we have a major scene, we have a shooting. Those 2 detectives are tied up. with the suspected shooter. We need someone to come in and assist with the processing of a crime scene. And so that's why I was called.
So were you at the police station when you got this call in?
I was at home.
You were at home. Did you go to Summer Street first?
No.
Where did you go first?
I went to the police department, which is pretty typical of any type of call out. I go to dispatch, I like to see what do we have, what do we need for resources, where is this crime scene, what are the things I should be bringing, because I made that mistake before of it being very cold or, very hot, and just getting any other information before going.
So once you arrived at the police station, did you become aware of anything? Did you speak with anyone there to make you aware of anything?
Yes, so Officer Birmingham had been back at the station, and from speaking with him briefly, he had been one of the responding officers. He had obtained, it looked to me like a video, like he used a department cruiser phone and videotaped a phone that was playing a video surveillance of the incident that I was supposed to be going out and documenting.
Were you aware at that time of where that footage came from?
I was told that it was from the cameras of 43 Summer Street, which was the alleged victim here, KYAL Violette's house.
So I believe we've already seen that video. Did you personally do that video?
The one that Officer Birmingham showed me, I did.
After you viewed that video, is that at that point, did you go out to Summer Street?
After grabbing the evidence kit and everything else I needed, yes.
When you arrived at Summer Street, can you tell us a little bit about what you see as you drive up?
Yep. So it was 10, I want to say 10:40, maybe 11, it could be even later than that. So it was dark. It was very cold. It was kind of spitting snow. It had snowed a little bit that day too. There was a couple of different police cruisers that were in the roadway of Summer Street facing out of town. Like if you're familiar with I know you guys did a kind of a walk-through area, but away from the police department towards heading towards Eastern Ave. They're facing that way as if they were responding to the call in the roadway. And then there was some yellow caution tape kind of wrapped around some of those cruisers over to a telephone pole to kind of preserve what was believed to be the entire scene.
So after you arrived, you kind of take this scene in. What is your first step in investigation, evidence processing, scene management? What's kind of the first thing you do as you get out of your cruiser?
Yep. So once I meet with whoever was there, so it was Lieutenant Hurley was kind of on scene to point outside the caution tape what they might have seen. I start taking initial photographs. The reason being is I don't want it, anytime I go into a scene, I could introduce either contamination, I could kick something over or anything. So I try to take as much overall photos that show the big picture before we start to go into that scene and look more.
Would you recognize some of those photos if we showed them to you today?
I would.
Your Honor, may I approach? Thank you. Great.
These are full.
These are exhibits 16, 17, and 18. Has Danie shown you what has been already in exhibit 16, 17, and 18? Would you mind taking a look at those pictures and telling us what you see?
Yep, so 16, 17, and 18 appear to be the roadway that would have been in front of 41 Summer Street. And some of these are pictures that I believe an officer must have either taken or body cam before.
Is this visual depicted in these pictures? Are they familiar to you having arrived on the scene before?
The physical layout and the blood on the ground, yes. When I arrived, EMTs had already left the scene as well.
Is this accurate for how the scene appeared?
Yes.
Is the blood on the street accurate how it appeared to you?
Yes.
Is the snow on the street accurate how it appeared to you?
Yes.
Your Honor, again, I believe you've already been told, but you will have copies of these in your deliberation room. Detective Danie, aside from taking pictures when you arrived on the scene and general observation, did you do anything else regarding evidence collection when you arrived?
Yep. So after taking initial photographs, we started to search the scene for pieces of evidence. I had previously been pointed out by the lieutenant, hey, there's shell casings that they had located with a flashlight. And so from there, we put placards, which is the yellow marker. You might see a number on it. I started with 5 because that's what I had. So we have to go, I believe it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I put a placard by that piece of evidence so that I know not to step on it, as well as to take a photo widescreen so that you can see all those placards and be like, okay, what was placard number 7? And you look and see what that was. And then I'd also take a mid-range and then a close-up of placard, say number 7 with whatever piece that evidence was.
Once you photograph the location of these shell cases, actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. Can you just clarify for everyone so we're all on the same page what a shell casing is?
Yep. So with a firearm, you have a shell casing that is enclosed, not by any means a firearms expert or anything, but you have a shell casing, usually brass, metal, that is enclosed with some gunpowder as well as other materials, and then a projectile, usually a lead bullet. And so when a firearm, shoots, it extracts that shell casing after that explosion goes off and a projectile goes out the barrel of the firearm, and the shell casing will get ejected, depending on the type of handgun it is. If it's a revolver, obviously it stays inside, but a automatic, like a handgun, it would extract shooting off.
So we're going to focus on these shell casings for a little bit. Once you photographed where they were, you marked them with the placards, what are kind of your next steps specifically regarding evidence collection for these shell casings? How do you preserve those?
So you said after photographing. So 6 shell casings were located on the ground. After they were photographed close range so you can see, they would be individually taken wearing gloves, put them into a paper envelope, packaged separately.
Your Honor, may I approach? Thank you. Counsel, this is 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, sorry. Detective Danie, is this the type of envelope that would be in it?
Yes.
If I were to show you this envelope, and you would be able to determine whether or not these shell casings piece each other.
Yes.
Without.
Right. So I'm just looking for the evidence label, Rochester Police Department. Like this one says 9mm Luger shell casing, placard number 10. So I remember that's placard number 10. This is evidence tape. I have my signature and the date that it was signed, making sure that it wasn't reopened or anything like that.
So even without opening those envelopes, are you able to confidently attest that those are shell casings you're treating?
These are the shell casings I collected.
Your Honor, I do move these shell casings being admitted as full exhibits. These are states 13, 14, sorry, 13, 14, 12, 9, 10, 11. So they're currently marked right.
So that's without objection. No objection. So if it is 9 through 14,
Detective Danie, I'm just going to open these for simplicity's sake. Doesn't matter.
What out? Would you like me to take the shell casing off? Each one?
One is fine. Your information published there.
Your Honor, this would be placard number 10, which is, oh, sorry, ID number exhibit 14. So each one of these probably should be in one of these smaller ones, just because that's what I had on scene that was loaded into here. Also got the number 10 on it for placard.
The labeling both on the center of the dual officers used to create the correct placard.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a ton of placards out there. We want to make sure the picture I take and the shell casing I seize and the envelope I put in, I need label number 10 so that when I have, say, 30 shell casings, I can really say this is that one, and that one was located here. Yep.
This is one. To your recollection, were they all of this nature?
Yes, they were.
What does that indicate to you as an officer?
That the, I'm sorry.
That they were all essentially identical shell casings.
That came from the same type of gun. You know, often too, we don't see a whole lot of people loading different types of ammunition into a gun. It's all the same type of ammunition. So I could lead me to believe that it probably came from a same type of gun, but the fact that it's all 9mm definitely came from a 9mm handgun.
Were shell casings the only piece of evidence that you collected from the scene that night?
It was not.
Can you tell us what else you collected from the scene?
Yep. So in the area where there's the trail of blood, in front of the driveway, right around there, 41, Mr. Levesque's residence, there was a black holster for a handgun.
I'm going to pause you there. Would you recognize that holster if you saw it today?
I would.
Detective Danie, can you just reiterate for the jury where you found this holster specifically?
It was right in the front area of the driveway or the roadway of 41 Summer Street.
Did you conduct the same method with the holster that you did for the shells in terms of preserving where it was located on the scene?
I did.
Did that include the placard placement?
Yes.
Did that include photographing it?
Yes.
Thank you. Counter manager. At the moment, it's right. Detective Danie, does this bag also contain the same label, essentially, which Michelle did in terms of where it was found the placard and?
Yep. So this white, I know you can't read it, but this white thing is what we call an evidence tag for the Rochester Police Department. It gives us a property number, and then I label it as the Black Hawk, which is a company holster, placard number 11.
And it's a little bit of a dimension of that. And now that you've seen it visually, are you able to confirm that as a holster that you found?
This is. Yep.
Your Honor, I'm getting this from and this exhibit is Stacy.
Without objection.
No objection. This is now the full.
Commissioner Collins. Other than the holster and the shell casings, Detective, did you collect any other evidence that night?
There was some paperwork and looked like receipts and cigarette pack that was located near the area of the holster that was collected.
So you found the holster. Did you find a gun?
Yes. So at the scene, with the blood going up towards the front steps near 41 Summer Street, in the parking lot or the driveway of 41 Summer Street was a truck that had its, it was like a plow truck, and it had its driver's side door open, and an officer was standing by, making sure no one would go in that. That was a told to me that it was identified as Mr. Levesque's truck. And so at that point, I had to speak to another detective that was speaking to Mr. Levesque to be able to go into that truck.
Did you ultimately receive permission to go into that truck?
Yep, so I spoke to Detective Garston, who had Mr. Levesque sign a permission to search the truck and its contents there, which granted me the right to go in and look for any additional evidence.
Upon that permission, were you able to locate a firearm inside that truck?
Yeah, so even looking on the outside with the door open, you could see a 9mm handgun with its slide locked back to the rear and an empty magazine that was separate, and they were both sitting on the driver's seat.
So I just want to clarify, if there's a gun and a magazine, are they together at this point?
On
When you
scene,
saw it on the
they're next to each other. The magazine is not inserted into the magazine well.
thank you for clarifying, I think I made this for. Your Honor, I would like to show the witness the marked state exhibit 5 for ID.
Can we approach on this though?
Detective Danie, I'm showing you, I'm going to show you what has been marked as this exhibit 5 for ID. This has been rendered safe by all involved personnel
It has.
in this particular matter. I'm not going to hand the box over to you, I'm just going to show you, do you recognize the firearm in this box?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize the firearm in this box?
Both from photographing it, or if we could look back at photos and see the serial number, as well as the fact that the box has the property, and I see the property tag as well. As the property tag, the evidence tape, and signature as well.
And I only mentioned about the gun. The gun is not the only item in here. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
What else is in here?
There is a magazine for the gun.
Are you able to tell visually by looking at it if the magazine is empty?
Yes, I am.
Is this the condition when she found both the gun and the magazine at the time?
It is.
Understanding that it was not the type of box.
Right, it was just, in the condition it was, sitting on the driver's seat.
Thank you, Detective. Your permission to publish.
Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, so this has been by agreement, it's a full exhibit, so it's going to be a full exhibit. Just so you understand the protocol down the road, this weapon will not be sent back to you like all the other exhibits in the jury room. This is the one type of exhibit we don't do that with. If, because it is a full exhibit, if at any point you wanted to inspect it more carefully or see it, we would arrange to have it brought back into the courtroom and have you brought back to the courtroom to look at it. But just for security purposes, we don't allow floor. Yes, you can publish it here.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the record, this is United States Exhibit 5.
Thank you.
Detective Danie, did you discover anything else in the defendant's truck relating to a firearm while you were searching it?
There was a loaded 9mm magazine separate in a black backpack.
When you say separate, can you tell us where you found that?
I believe that was in the back area, so not in the front 2 seats, in a backpack.
Did you attempt to collect any additional non-firearm evidence from this truck?
I did. So looking at the truck, it had a series of wires, and I noticed what looked like a camera from the rearview mirror that was pointed out towards the hood. I know that sometimes it's typical of people that are plowing to record. And so I looked and saw that it had a SD card slot. And so that camera system was taken in hopes that there would be some video on there.
Did there ultimately end up being any video that was retrievable?
No, after a search warrant was granted, the extraction showed there was nothing, no recordings of anything. So, just
Did
wasn't.
you collect any other recordings from the defendant's property?
I did, not from the truck.
Not from the truck. Can you tell us where you did collect it from?
Yep, so Detective Garson also said that Mr. Levesque had granted permission to obtain I think it was a Night Owl DVR system, which was the surveillance cameras for 41 Summer Street. We were told that there was a system inside the house at 41 as well as the garage. Myself and Detective Livingstone were able to retrieve the DVR system from the garage because the door was unlocked, but we were unable to, at the time on scene, grab the DVR system from the house because it was locked and no one was answering.
So that night specifically on April 4th, is that DVR video the last piece of evidence you were able to collect that night?
Myself, yes.
Did you conduct any other investigation that night?
Yep. So upon bringing evidence back to the station and logging it into our evidence lockers, I found that Mr. Levesque's daughter was in the station lobby with officers and hadn't been formally interviewed.
Without getting into the specifics of that interview, did you ultimately conduct an interview?
An interview was conducted with Detective Livingstone and I and KYAL Levesque.
Did that specific interview kind of conclude your investigation for that night specifically?
Yes, it did.
Did that conclude your investigation overall?
No, it did not.
Can you tell us a little bit about the next investigative steps that you took?
The next steps, I believe, was Detective Livingstone and I responded to Boston Medical Center upon hearing that the victim, KYAL Violette, had been transported all the way to Boston for his injuries.
And again, without getting into specifics, when you arrived at Boston Medical, were you able to speak with anyone that was there?
Yep, and I was able to speak to KYAL's wife, Angela LaChance, his mother, Cindy Glenn, his daughter, Kendra Violette, and his son, Kylan Violette, was there, but he's a juvenile, and so we didn't speak to him at that time.
Were you able to speak with Kyle when you were there?
I was not.
Why not?
He had a breathing tube down. He was very heavily medicated. He was conscious per se that he could moan maybe in pain, but he wasn't able to talk to us at all.
Would it have been functional for you to even attempt to interview him at that point?
No, there would have been no interview.
Is that the only time you went down to Boston Medical?
It is not.
Can you tell us about the next time you went down?
So when I first went down that time, though, I did photograph his injuries. And then we responded back at a later date because Kyle had a bullet that was extracted from his face.
And you mentioned the photographs. I believe it's already been public, admitted still exhibits. They are 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, and 23.
Council. So I only introduced the.
Danie, Maria, my previous question. You mentioned you took some photographs. Do you recognize those photos?
I would.
Some of those photos at all. Do you mind just taking a look at this? Are these photos familiar to you?
They are.
How do you recognize these photos?
These are photos that I took and uploaded to the case from Mr. Violette on the date that we went to Boston Medical Center.
Is this the first time you're at Boston Medical?
First time. Yep. First time meeting Kyle himself.
Your Honor, I think this is all dated as full exhibits, that's 24, 19, 20, 21, 22.
If I could just have a quick inspection.
Yes.
These may be admitted without objection.
So no objection. Exhibits 19 through 24 are fully admitted. Thank you.
Detective Danie, is this the extent of all of the photos you took
No,
that day? If you could estimate how many pictures you took, would you be able to do that?
I'd say maybe 30 that day.
Did some of those photos include pictures of the victim in this case's genitalia?
Yes,
But no, we have not. Did you recognize those photos in the exhibits that I showed you?
yes,
I'm sorry, I want to clarify. The pictures of the genitalial pictures, were those included in the pictures that I showed you?
no.
Did you want to publish these?
Yes, Your Honor, may I publish to the jury?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you mind giving me a hand?
Detective Danie, we discussed this very briefly.
My preference is going to be showing exhibits and you don't ask questions why unless they're about.
Understood, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to multitask.
And again, these will be visible back in your deliberation room once that begins. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Danie, can you tell us about your second trip down to Boston Medical?
We had been notified, I believe, by either family member or even the medical staff that there was a bullet that had been extracted from what was believed to be Kyle's face. And so we went down to retrieve that piece of evidence.
Did you ultimately collect that bullet?
We did.
Detective Danie, I'm going to hand you a pair of gloves.
Thank you.
Detective, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 15 for identification. Having gone through your process of tracking labeling evidence a few times at this point, can you tell us, based on the label on the outside of this box, what is within?
Yep, this is the Rochester Police Department property label. And it says bullet from left side of KYAL Violette's face.
Is that how you would label?
That's what I labeled it.
Would you mind opening that box? I'm going to pause you right there, Your Honor. I do move that this yet be stricken and that is a full exhibit. This is State's 15.
That's without objection.
No objection. That's fully admitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Detective Danie, can you tell us about what you're looking at right now?
Yep, this it's a biohazard bag, and then it is a clear container with what looks like fragmented bullet. And the label says KYAL Violette 4/5/2024. Gives some of his information as well as the doctor.
Is this the condition in which you received or obtained the bullet?
This is how we received it, and then we packaged it.
I just want to clarify, when you say this is how you received it, are we including the plastic bag that is?
Yeah, this is how the medical staff handed it over to us.
Thank you. Your Honor, permission to publish the jury. So Detective Danie, after you, and I apologize, did you go down to Boston Medical yourself the second time?
No, I went with Detective Livingstone as well.
Thank you. So after you and Detective Livingstone returned from Boston Medical the second time, did that conclude your investigation of this case?
It did not.
Can you tell us what the next investigative steps that you took were?
I'd have to look at my report. I believe I got a new copy of a video from Angela LaChance at that point.
Would you like to take a look at your report?
That would be great.
Detective, we discussed reports a little bit earlier, but just kind of to review, did you write this report closer in time to the investigative steps that you took than we are today?
I did.
Would it be an accurate representation of the day you took certain steps and what steps those were?
It would.
And would it help refresh your recollection?
It would.
Thank you.
I said,
This is, yes, 167 to 169.
thank you.
Thanks. Did you want the previous steps too, or for?
After the,
Okay.
does that help refresh your recollection?
Does.
All right, can you tell us what those next steps were, what that next piece of your investigation was?
So we had previously applied for, like I said, we had seized the DVR systems from 41 Summer Street. We had to apply for a search warrant to actually review the contents of those. So we did that, that was granted. And on the 16th, I began the review of those video systems.
Do you recall how many videos you obtained?
I'd have to look. There's a series of different video angles from the garage, the front, as well as the.
Understood. Would seeing a copy of the report
Sure.
help aid in your recollection? Same page as counsel.
Sorry about that. So I have it listed as camera 1 pointing from the side of 41 Summer Street, and then camera 2 pointing from the front steps of 41 Summer Street.
Does that refresh your recollection?
It does. Yep.
Of the two videos, did you view both of them?
I did.
Would you be able to recognize and identify them for the jury if we played them for you?
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe. Frisbie, yes.
May we briefly approach?
Jury departure.
Please be seated. Counsel, you may continue your examination. Are we at the point of needing to rearrange where we are in the room?
Yes, let's start with that since the TV is already set, Your Honor.
Well, was I not supposed to drag it?
It's, Detective, if you'll bear with me for a moment
I think you're going to be happy.
while I attempt to set up, but if, yes,
Yes, sir.
the judge is correct. If you wouldn't mind stepping down off the witness stand. So Detective Danie, I just want to clarify. In total, how many videos did you view of this incident? Oh,
There was the original video, Officer Birmingham showed me recording. There was the 43 surveillance camera that had audio. Then there was the DVR systems. I believe there was one on the front porch that faces towards Summer Street, at 41 Summer. There was the side angle of the house, and then there was one on the garage. So there should have been 5 potential camera angles, with 2 of them being Officer Birmingham recording up the same video.
Thank you for clarifying that, Detective.
Do you guys hear me?
Detective, I'm pulling up one of the videos and I will turn on the TV in a moment so that we're all able to view which one we are looking at here. Does this image itself, prior to the video playing, look familiar to you?
Yes, this is like one of the camera angles from 41 Summer Street.
Are you able to identify anything in this still of the video that indicates that to you?
Just having reviewed it and seeing kind of the layout, this looks like a truck as well.
I just want to be clear for the record, this is State's Exhibit 2.
Yes, this is a full exhibit right now.
Detective Danie, in your review of the videos that you obtained in this case, did you in any way make notes for your own personal use of what was going on in the videos?
I did.
Can you tell us how you went about making those notes?
It's, the way that it was playing was on a DLC player, which allows you to do frame by frame. So I can click it and it'll slowly move. Sometimes I will click it and you won't even have a second pass that you're seeing the frames move. Just because sometimes in videos we watch something happen very quick and I want to break it down as what actually happened. So from there, I would take the date, the time of the recording, and you'll see that up on the top, there's also that goes into the seconds as well. And so from there, I would do the date, the times down to the second, and then narrate what I saw in this case. That's how I documented the video camera angles.
I know the rest of us have been through this before. You have not. As we go through this, I'm going to pause occasionally and we're going to discuss a little bit about what you're looking at both now and when you viewed the videos initially. Are you able to tell us, we've seen quite a few videos and angles of driveways in this particular case. Whose driveway are we looking at right now?
This is 41 Summer Street.
Is that,
This driveway is where, when I arrived on scene initially for the crime scene, the truck was parked facing in.
and when you say the truck, is that the plow truck that we're looking at right here?
Correct, yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what you see?
At this point, I see the driver's door open, and I see the driver exiting the vehicle and actually walking past the driver's door.
Is this consistent with the way you viewed this video during the course of your investigation?
It is.
What are you able to tell us about what we're looking at now?
This should be Mr. KYAL VIOLETTE approaching Mr. Jason Levesque.
At that point, can you tell which direction Mr. Violette is walking?
At that point, Ron would appear to be walking back towards his residence and turns and faces Mr. Levesque.
Can you tell us again?
I made the same observation, he's walking back towards 43 Summer Street, but facing Mr. Levesque.
I just want to clarify, you arrived at the scene the night that this happened, correct?
I did.
Are you able to tell what is being pointed to based on your knowledge of both the scene and in having reviewed all the videos in this case?
What KYAL VIOLETTE's pointing to? He's pointing towards his driveway area where snow was plowed.
Can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at, what we just saw?
I saw Mr. Violette pointing back and forth towards a fully completed snow pile and then walking out of frame. And then I see Mr. Levesque grab and start to point towards the direction of where Mr. Violette was and start to take a step towards his direction.
When you say grab the point, are you able to tell what you believe he's pointing at Mr. Violette?
Based on just the video alone? No. Based on interviews and the other information, as well as the other video and the audio, a firearm.
And I just want to clarify, are you able to tell what direction Mr. Violette was walking just prior to the defendant pulling the firearm?
Back towards his direction.
And I do just want to clarify, was there audio on this video when you viewed it?
There was no audio on the DVR systems obtained. The only audio was from 43 Summer Street.
Thank you for clarifying. Are you able to tell in this video which direction Mr. Levesque just stepped?
I have to watch that one much again. And this is why I went frame by frame with my notes, because I didn't want to miss any sort of steps there. So it appears to me that Mr. Violette walks forward and then starts to go backwards before what looks like a shot is fired.
Okay, and I just want to clarify by backwards, is that in the direction of his own home?
Yep, so forwards towards Mr. Levesque, backwards after towards his own home, and then shot is fired.
Okay, so it doesn't appear that he's walking towards Mr. Levesque.
Not at that time.
And that flash that we just saw, are you able to tell us what you believe that was?
I'd say it's consistent with the gun shot.
We just saw the defendant move a little bit in that last frame, and I understand I'm stopping and starting this a lot, so if you need me to go back, please let me know, and I'm happy to replay some of that. Can you tell us, during the review that you did of this video where you went frame by frame, were you able to tell, sounds like you had better pausing technology than we do, approximately how many steps the defendant took towards Mr. Violette after that first shot, or between that first shot and the remaining shots?
That's what I have it narrated in my report. I believe it was 5 steps towards the direction of Mr. Violette after the first shot was fired.
Were you able to tell in your frame-by-frame review about how long of a pause there was between that first shot and the next shots?
If you looked at my report with the time frame, you'd be able to read that. Yes.
So it sounds like I don't want to try and put words in your mouth, but would taking a look at your report,
Yes,
Help.
I'd be
Be able to
look at the
calculate that?
time frame of showing the first shot versus the time I narrate looking at the next shot.
thank you, this is just.
We can have, one second.
Detective Danie, I'm showing you one of the pages of the report that is taped.
Is something you wanted me to read or just answer the question?
Just to answer the question,
How long?
Mhm. Approximately how long?
So for this, I would just need to look at the second camera as well. Is that something that's okay? Because he steps out of the frame, I don't see the next shots going. I can tell you when he walks towards and steps out of frame and then walks back, just on this camera angle alone. But the second camera picked up and walking forward more, and then what I deemed as shots.
We'll go back to that with the next
Okay,
camera then.
so, matter of 6 seconds between walking forward and then being seen back on camera.
Thank you for that one moment. Looks like we timed out. Just a moment, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you. of the other videos. Does one of the other videos you obtained from the Levesque house give an angle of what's happening out of frame in this particular video?
It does, there's more of a context of what Kyle is doing and what happened when Mr. Levesque steps out of the camera angle facing towards Kyle. I'll tell you that having both angles was huge because we can see what happened by the car, and then we can see what also happened past the hedges and in the front of the house.
So actually,
both are able to tell the story.
so we're going to go to that next camera angle in a moment. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it seems very fast watching the video just as a video itself. Going frame by frame, did that allow you to get a better sense of what was happening and how long it took?
Yes, because I quite literally did bullet points of any time someone in the body had a turn. So an example would be Kyle takes steps towards Mr. Levesque is looking at him. Kyle turns around this way. So each camera angle had several different bullet points in a matter of a second, a couple seconds. And this would be that same camera angle we just showed.
Yes.
Okay.
Having both been at the scene and having reviewed all the videos in this case, are you able to estimate approximately how far Mr. Violet was from Mr. Levesque?
From the point where he gets face to face with him to the point where the shot was fired, I'd say that's maybe about 10 to 15 feet. That's just looking at like the distance and looking at how much the truck takes up in the video and knowing the size of an average truck.
Detective Lee, we're going to take a look at that next video you had mentioned. Detective, I'm going to play this video through, and we're going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about what we just saw.
Okay.
But to clarify, yes, it'll. What is the angle of this camera?
This is the front steps of 41 Summer Street. And it's based in an angle that would be pointed towards like the driveway direction, and 43 Summer Street, Mr. West residence is behind us.
So just to clarify, this is recording essentially the street and sidewalk in front of him to the angle of the Levesque porch. In that direction, is that Kyle? You just
That's
said?
Kyle, he's coming from the direction of his residence.
So I'm going to pause that and go back to a couple of points. I'm going to try and skip to where. So I believe you mentioned this earlier. Is that Mr. Violet?
It is.
And are you able to kind of geographically orient us with where that big tree was that we saw in the last video, just in relation to this porch?
You were first.
Please.
So the porch continued a little bit, there would be a window and there would be hedges in the driveway around you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Detective Danie, based on your prior review of this, B, kind of positioning of some of these shadows over here, are you able to determine at what point Mr. Violet begins walking back to his house, viewing this video in conjunction with the other videos?
Between looking at both and going frame by frame, you can see and start to come into the frame.
So is this, at this point, it looks like Mr. Violet has walked farther away from the defendant than we had maybe seen on the first video?
Yes, just because he's out of frame in the first video. It looks like he was walking away and just turned around at this point and is facing Mr. Levesque direction.
I understand it's a little bit at the top of the video. Can you tell us what we just witnessed kind of up that top corner based on your investigation and your viewing of these videos?
Looking at the video alone, it's Kyle Violet falling to the ground. Based on the other videos, the audio of this was the first shot.
So just to clarify, the defendant would have been out of frame, but he's visible on the other video.
Yes. And visible in the 43 Summer Street.
Does Mr. Violet get up at any point?
No,
And by get up, I just want to clarify, does he stand up?
he does not stand up.
Does he appear to go towards the defendant?
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening now as we're viewing?
Yeah, so when I go frame by frame, I was saying Kyle Violet falls to the ground this time. This time it looks like he turned around on all fours. I don't see anything in his hands. But this time he is crawling. This time I see a gust of smoke or what looks like smoke that wasn't there before. And based on looking at the other videos, it was, I determined that to be the next initial shot.
Okay, so that would be the next shots after the defendant has stepped forward.
Yes.
from your knowledge of this case, your scene investigation, is this approximately where Mr. Violette was found by officers and EMT shortly thereafter?
It was. And the photos that were originally taken of the pathway of blood and the concentration of blood there was quite literally just flipped around from this way. If that makes sense.
So we're going to view one more video. I just want to clarify, I believe you mentioned, can you tell us about the video you collected the night of the actual shooting?
So the night of the actual shooting would have been from the garage. DVR system had a separate DVR system on the surveillance of what we want to shoot.
And you viewed this video as well? Right. Okay. Is this the way you recall viewing that video at the time?
Yes.
Can you tell us just what we're looking at?
You're looking at the driveway of 41 Summer Street. If you can see here, this is the hedge that we were talking about before. So there would have been a camera almost right over this way, or it might have even been this way pointing down. And then this is Summer Street. After this house over here is Mr. Violette's house. This is where the truck was parked when I arrived on scene to process the scene.
And I do just want to clarify, when you say this is where the truck was parked, it's a little bit difficult to tell in this particular angle, but I do think it may have been clear in the last one. Is there more driveway in this corner?
Yeah, he was able to pull the truck all the way.
So is this camera angle from all the way into the garage?
It's attached right to the garage.
Detective, I'm going to skip ahead because this is a fairly lengthy video to so we see that big kind of white light in the foreground, the background, I suppose. Are you able to tell us what that is?
I'm assuming that would be glare from both the snow and the lights from the snowplow, yellow amber.
Detective, I understand it's a little farther away than the other videos, but are you able to tell what's going on at the truck's door at this point?
Other than Mr. Violet approaching Mr. Levesque and those two almost face to face, that's what I'm able to determine.
Is this consistent with the other videos that you viewed?
It is.
Detective, I'm going to back that up a little bit, like I just did with the previous video. We're going to go a little bit more in depth with that. So I just want to clarify at this point, is this still KYAL VIOLETTE walking?
It is.
This is that initial,
His initial approach to the property.
at that point, are you able to view what direction Mr. VIOLETTE is walking?
It's walking back towards the direction of the residence.
Does he still appear to be walking back towards his own residence?
Yeah, it seems to be communicating with Mr. Levesque pointing, but also walking back.
It was very brief. You're able to tell us what you just witnessed between the defendant and Mr. VIOLETTE.
Yeah, it looks like Mr. Violette's walking back towards Mr. Levesque. Mr. Levesque raises his hand and points out. Mr. Violette turns around at that point.
At that point, is that another angle, I suppose? Are you able to tell what the defendant's doing from that angle?
It looks like he, after the initial shot, drops his hands and then comes back out, extends, goes to one hand and approaches the area, and then he looks at the other camera angle, he's approaching KYAL VIOLETTE.
At any point in any of these videos, do you see the defendant try and help Mr. VIOLETTE?
I do not.
Do you see him try and stop the bleeding?
No,
Do you see him try and provide first aid?
I do not.
Detective Danie, I believe we are done with the videos for this portion of your testimony. I do have a couple of additional questions for you.
That's the end of the video.
This is no doubt my fault. You told me to do nothing.
It's durable. Detective Danie, I apologize for a little bit of the inconsistency or out of order questions I'm going to ask you, but I do want to go back very briefly to what we were talking about earlier and the scene photos that you took regarding the shell casings and their locations with the placards.
Yep.
Would you recall those pictures if I
would.
showed them to you today?
I don't have any problem with that.
It's, they have not been marked for restitution yet. Thank you. Yes, they do.
They all went through it, they all.
They can be one exhibit or multiple exhibits or there are 3 pictures, but they're all. Technically, there are 3 photos attached. I'm reviewing them and letting you know to recognize those.
Yep, I recognize these. These are photos I took on scene of the initial crime scene.
Can you tell us what we're looking at in those photos?
This is what I was, you're going to show. This is the overview initial photographs after placards have been placed so that you can actually see, oh, this is the location of those placards of, hey, this is placard 6. What is placard 6 that we're looking at? And so these are placards that are located in the roadway of Summer Street around the area of where that shooting that we just saw occurred. And these placards are the locations of all evidence located, mainly the 6 shell casings.
Your Honor, I ask if you guys disagree and see if it is a full exhibit as stated in the file.
Without objection.
No objection, there, we'll do the same.
videos, your collection of the various scene evidence, your drives down to Boston Memorial. Were there any other investigative steps that you took for this particular case?
Detective Livingstone and I had interviewed, I think it's Haley Freeman, who was reported to be inside. That was Kira's friend from UNH. I attended the forensic interview of KYAL VIOLETTE for his statement. I examined later the actual shell casings and photographed them with a close-up lens to show that the primer had been struck. So once again, not a firearms expert, but on the shell casings, we're looking for the firing pin imprint on the back of that shell casing, which would indicate that the firing pin hit and struck the primer, causing that explosion, which would cause a projectile to leave and the shell casing to be extracted. So I was looking for those and photographed those as well.
Do you recall if that was present in the shell casings?
It was,
In all of them?
all 6.
Thank you. One moment, Your Honor. Detective, I have no further questions for you at this point. I imagine Mr. Attorney's esteemed.
Thank you.
Hey there, thanks for stopping in. We hope you will join us again. We all look forward to next time. We get to talk about true crime. Clues. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule and the defense rests. Our true crime family is great. All types of topics we debate. Smash that like and ring that bell. Hit subscribe, you might as well.